2021 Walton County Zoning Board of Justice meeting to order. If you would, please stand as we have our invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Charlie, if you would.
Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to live in this great nation, in this great county. Please watch over us tonight to help us to make the best decision for our county and our citizens. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. We do appreciate all the board members that are here tonight. We understand Mr. Henderson is out of town and we regret that he's not able to be with us. We thank Karen for all the hard work that she does to get this meeting ready and afterwards to make sure Mr. Dietz does his job in preparing the final orders. We appreciate Mr. Hayward Dietz for his leadership in our attorney position. We thank Mr. Stephen and the county staff for being here tonight, along with our law enforcement. Never know when we may need you. Thanks for being here. Are there any announcements that needs to be made, Mr. Dietz?
The only announcement I'll make is one of the appeals that was pending for the Mitchell brothers. You may recall that one. That was the Kaya situation. Looks like that matter's been resolved at one level, which means that looks like the appeal from this board's decision is going to go away. That hasn't completely happened yet, but that was circulated about a week and a half ago, so by the attorneys. So was that the last issue that came before the board? Or yeah, they didn't appeal that one. Hadn't been appealed. It was the one that was previous prior to that, which is probably about 1.5 to 2 years.
Heard
old.
in the court, or are they just going to withdraw it?
Looks like it's going to be withdrawn. Is the plan. So it hasn't been withdrawn as of today. No paperwork's been filed, but the judge's office, Judge Lewis's office, did request if a joint motion was going to be filed to go ahead and kill that appeal. That hasn't happened yet, so we're just going to have to wait and see. But it looks like that appeal is going to go away. So that's the only update I have.
I wasn't here at the last meeting. Did you explain there was another, the judge did something on one of our decisions?
Oh, I think there was, I think I made reference to that the First District Court of Appeals had issued an order, which was in reference to how this board has already started, has been for months now, actually probably a year now, in reference to how presentations before this board will be made, where the county will have to make the presentation and not allow private attorneys to make the presentation on behalf of the county. So the First District Court of Appeals had ruled that that was the proper way to do it. So that's something we've been doing for some time. So
What case was that?
that was the lot split case. I forget the, I think it was Hayden, Hayden. It was a lot split case where the county had allowed a local attorney to make the county and that the property owners had kind of the same argument, and the county had let the private attorney make most of the argument.
Did they overturn our position, or they just made that determination?
No, they did. That matter will come back before this board to rehear. So they did. So the local court, Judge Lewis, did overturn it because he said the county should have made the presentation.
Appeal.
Right.
That's the one that was appealed by the Mr. Shipman's law.
Correct.
And that was a lot split?
Yeah, I believe it dealt with a lot split.
Okay.
Something like that.
Was that because you didn't do your job?
I wasn't here for that one. You remember Mrs. Camella was here, but
Can't pin that on. All right. Is that all?
yes, sir.
First item on the agenda tonight is attempts and variance that has been removed from the agenda. No action needs to be taken on that. Is that correct? Second item on the agenda is a Ziegler variance request by Matthews and Jones LLP is going to split that application.
Johnson, you want me to go ahead and swear in everybody in mass?
Ah, the doggone. y'all gonna have to just wait a minute. Anyone here that plan to speak before this board tonight, if you plan to speak before this board, please stand, raise your right hand, and swear that the comments that you make before this board will be the truth and that you will not lie to the board.
You all swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God? Thank you.
Appreciate that. I rehearsed it, but I slipped my mind.
I still look first up?
Yes.
Okay.
What you wearing a tie tonight?
I thought we changed that rule. Yeah, I've been in court all
We're
day.
not,
Sorry about that.
we're not gonna give them the opportunity to persuade the board. We're gonna give you the first opportunity.
Well, thank y'all for having me back. Stephen Tatum, Brittany and Brandon Siegler. You guys may recall this. We were here back in, I think it was July, maybe August. This is the wetland buffer in Sacred Oaks subdivision. My clients bought their house in December of 2020. And when they bought the house, there was a backyard, or there is still a backyard, retaining wall built, had been backfilled, sod put in by the builder. They purchased the house thinking that that backyard was a legal backyard. After having purchased the house, there's no garage on the house at all. So they went to the HOA. They'd already been told by the builder they could put a shed in the backyard. They went to the HOA, got permission from the HOA to build a shed in the backyard. No one ever mentioned anything about building permits. So they constructed the shed. April of 2021 rolls around, and the code enforcement officers discover the shed, give them a notice of violation, tell them that they need to go get a building permit. They go to the building permit office, staff helps them fill out their building permit application, and then it's under review by planning, as is typical. Planning discovers that the backyard does not belong there because there's a wetland buffer off of Mac Bayou, which is, it's really not Mac Bayou behind their house. It's kind of the wetland area attached to Mac Bayou that's behind their house. And you've got to be 25 feet off of the wetland buffer per the land development, off the wetland line per the land development code. So we did a little digging and found out that the wetland as delineated on the plat isn't entirely accurate. It actually sits a lot further off. We had an environmental analysis done, but when we were here before you last time, we did not have the survey updated yet because, sure as Mr. Burgess can attest, the surveyor's a little behind right now. So we finally did get our survey submitted that shows where the wetland is at now and where the new wetland buffer would be. But during our meeting back in July, Mr. Chick also noticed that the shed that was constructed, it probably also needs a variance, although that was never brought up by anybody but him, but we appreciate you pointing that out. So we had that located on the survey as well, so that we can ask for that variance today also. But just a little bit of background about my clients. They are a young married couple, both of them own their own business. They spent most of their life savings purchasing this house. They bought it with the intent of it being like their forever home. The backyard was key because they did need the shed, because part of his business he needs to be able to store some things there. And then of course their normal items you would need around the house that you would store in a garage typically. With no garage, the shed is needed. If they had known that the backyard was in any way illegal and that they would not be able to build a shed, they would have never purchased the property. So they're in a really bad situation that was not in any way their fault, without, no one ever pointed out to them, hey, this is in the wetland buffer. So I've brought documents with me today that I wanted to show you. You should have the updated survey in your files, but I did bring a bigger copy because the 8.5 by 11 is a little bit harder to read.
That's the one that's dated August the 31st, 21.
Yes, sir. That one's an overall view, but I got the surveyor to go ahead and prepare us a little bit closer up so that you can see where the wetland buffer line was, well, where it is currently today per law, and where it should be located based on the present location of the wetlands.
board has these both of these items. We'll go ahead and mark these as applicant's Exhibit 1 for the full survey, and the one that's being passed around now, the close-up, is applicant's Exhibit 2.
So enter.
Now, if you take a look at that, you can see, let's focus on the wetland buffer first. The dashed line that is closest to the back of the house is where the current wetland buffer is located. As you can see in that northwest corner, it comes within about a foot of the house. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what a wetland buffer entails, but by code, you're not supposed to do anything in it at all. It's supposed to stay in its natural state. So that would leave them with absolutely no backyard if this were to stay in place. But after the environmental analysis was completed and the wetland delineation done, the new line for where the wetland buffer would be shifted considerably back. That is the dotted line that kind of bisects through the shed, which is the frame building. That's where the new 25-foot wetland buffer would be based on the current position of where the wetlands are. So the variance we're asking for, the Land Development Code, we're asking for a variance from the 25-foot provision of the Land Development Code and asking for a wetland buffer that would be consistent with this plan. So 8.79 feet on the northeast corner and 14.95 feet on the northwest, 17 and some change in the middle. If it were granted, I would think it would be best just to reference that survey as what is
Survey
granted.
you're talking about, you're talking about the exhibit, this is.
It would be Exhibit B.
Exhibit B
Yes, sir.
or Exhibit A?
Exhibit B. It's actually located on
Which one's
both.
Exhibit A?
Yeah, I think we said applicants 1 and 2, but
Okay.
that would be applicants 1 that you have in your right hand. That's applicant 2.
Okay. And you saying that you're asking for,
So we're asking from a reduction from 25 feet down to 8.79 feet on the northeast corner and down to 14.95 feet on the northwest corner. And then it's a little bit further out in the middle, up to 17 feet in the middle.
and that is because the wetland line is moved by the termination.
Yes,
correct?
sir.
The first line, that dotted line, wetland that's next to the house, where did that come from?
The plat.
It's on the original plat, yes, sir. So whenever they platted this, 2005, I believe it was, the wetlands were closer at that point.
Supposedly.
Supposedly, yes, sir.
So they
I
did
mean,
their job,
assuming.
supposedly.
Um,
But you had a professional go out and establish that that line is where it's at.
Yes, sir, and that environmental analysis is in your packet, and she went out and flagged those spots that you see there, those points, and that's what the surveyor shot to provide you this info today.
This land had the builder took and built the fence and had the field before they purchased the lot.
That's absolutely correct. When they bought the house, one of the reasons they purchased it was because there was a fenced-in backyard, because it is very close to Mac Bayou Road. It literally butts up to Mac Bayou Road. So there's, a lot of traffic. Otherwise, they would not have even considered the house. They wasn't wanting to have kids and being that close to the road without that fence. But yes, sir, he put in retaining wall, backfield, sod, fence on top of it.
Contractor did.
Yes, sir, it's a contractor.
Part of license.
That's right. And
That's
apparently,
That's still doing business.
he just built a house right next door and did the exact
Has
same
no-
thing that's
Has
been
he
reported to code
prepared
enforcement.
this situation?
Potentially. If we can't get a variance, then we are looking at other options.
Oh, boy. Any questions? Go ahead.
Well, I'm under the impression that when a wetland buffer is on the plat, that's a hard line regardless of what the wetland does over time. I was going to ask the county if they would like to weigh in on their interpretation. It looks like the house set behind the original 25-foot buffer from the plat. And so regardless of where the wetland is, they would need the entire structure to be, I guess the variance would actually be to the plat, not to the existing condition.
So you want to let's finish up with this gentleman.
I guess
Stephen?
another question is, when you noticed for the variance, did you note that the shed is also violating the side setback?
That was not in the notice, no, sir. That was, all came up after the fact at our last meeting, which was continued.
Contractor owns the property next door?
Yes.
So he's not,
He's not contesting it
protesting.
at all.
He owns the land?
He owns the land and has built a house there and has done the exact same thing at that house, which has been reported to code enforcement with the wetland buffer. Yes, sir.
what about the brick pavers over the property line in the driveway?
That may be a title insurance issue. There's not a complaint right now with them, obviously, but that's something we can, that can be fixed. That's an easy fix compared to this.
Is there a problem with them not noticing the side setback violation to the property owners within 300 feet?
Before, it's my understanding, I think Mr. Dice is gonna tell you that since it wasn't notified, we can't, wasn't made notice, then we can't take a rule on it. Is that your opinion, Mr. Dice?
Yeah, if the county.
Well, if I may, the case law on noticing is substantial compliance. So we did comply noticing that there would be a variance hearing here. Your sign, the signs that are put up don't even say what the variance is for.
Position is, I agree with
Okay.
him on that. That if, anytime, it's my position that anytime that we find another issue that's in violation, we need to address it one way
Okay.
or the other. I don't think we can approve one and expect them to come back and do it again. It's a $400-something fee. It's several months in the making. I think somehow, though, that we need to get the attention of the builder on this and stop this from occurring, but that's gonna be a different subject. So I think we can address that.
Well, the house next door is currently on the market. It was just listed a couple days ago. And there is an open code violation on it. So between us and then now that, I think his attention is
I
is
think
had.
that I think you as a representative, as a legal for the owners, that you should file suit against him and tie that up in litigation until this issue is resolved. And I think we ought to not allow the variance, to make him give another piece of property to grant that. Wouldn't you like to have a bigger yard? Why can't we do that? I mean,
Well-
somehow you got to get these builders' attention when you have to go and through the hassle to get a permit, and they know better.
He's already been put on notice about this. The reason I would like to go ahead and get the variance today is for their sake, because right now this is hanging over their heads. You know, if they were to have to sell the house, yeah, it's a great market to sell a house in, but
Right.
you can't replace it.
Do you know if they got a permit for the shed? 'Cause
That was what started all of this, was they actually came in to get a permit for the shed. While planning was reviewing that permit, they discovered the wetland buffer issue, not the setback issue. And so they said, no, you've got a restoration plan, you've got to put everything back the way it was.
the shed was already there when they went to go get a permit after the fact?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Same builder build it?
He helped. Actually, the client built it, and then he helped provide.
All right.
But like I said, they were never told about a building permit, even from the HOA. They went to the HOA and got approval from them. But I did want to point out a couple more things before y'all get done with me. Along Mac Bayou Road, along Mac Bayou itself, there are several lots. I'm fixing to give you another, I guess this will be number 3.
You gonna give us what?
I'm going to give you one more exhibit.
In regards to this?
Yes, sir.
So this would be marked as applicant's exhibit 3.
So in there. It's the same issue?
Same issue, yes, sir.
Is the fence off the property line as well?
The fence is on the back property line. Looks like it may be a little bit off on the back right corner. 0.4 inches maybe, 9.4 feet.
Go ahead.
Okay, so if you take a look at this, the red outlined lot is my client's lot. You see where it says 17.08 with a red line? If you look right there, you can see retaining walls that have been built in this exact same area. It runs from where it says 1708, you can see a yard, 2 lots back to the southwest, has a backyard that goes almost all the way back to the back property line. So does the one in between. You can even kind of make out a retaining wall there. And You can't see it as well on the lot to the northeast, but there is a backyard on that one, and there's a backyard and retaining wall one more lot over. So this is consistent development pattern in that area. I'm not sure how they've gone about doing it. I was told that the Corps of Engineers were contacted, and the Army Corps said they didn't have any problem with putting a retaining wall up, and so it was put up. Now, I don't know if the county approved it or not. I've not been able to find any records on that, but this is something that has occurred throughout this development along that Mac Bayou area, or finger off of Mac Bayou. So it's not, if we're in violation, presumptively those fellows are too. I know two wrongs don't make a right, but it's just something else to consider that I'd like you to take into account. And finally, if you don't mind, I would like for my client to come up and speak. This is Brittany Sigler, and she just wants to tell you what herself.
Brittany Sigler, I just wanted to tell you guys thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight. I know I did not get to last time. And this has been heavy on my heart since the end of March. We obviously would not have purchased the home if we knew we had literally inches of backyard. And when we began our search on Realtor.com, the pictures had no fence at first, but the house sat there and they realized that it was beside the road and they needed to get it gone. So then they started doing that. And then we come into the picture and see the home and they're like, oh yeah, we built this fence. We know a lot of people don't want to not have a fence by Mac Bayou, and so it was more appealing to us. And so the builder is also on the HOA as well because they own a couple more lots in there. So she said that we could have a structure built back there, no problem. And she was actually on the HOA. So why would a builder not say, oh, well, you need a permit? And then we actually had incorporated it into the contract that they were going to build it, and then they took it out because they knew that what they had done with the wetland buffer. And then they actually said, well, we're not going to include it in your home loan, but we'll give you all of our subs' names, and you all can build it yourself. And then you won't have to, we won't charge you extra. So when a builder actually tells you, they'll give you their subs, they'll help you do it, but we're going to try to save you money, and my husband went out and took a signature loan out. So we would never, why would he do that if we thought that we should have had a permit? We had no idea. And then there's a lot of things he said I won't repeat, obviously, for time, but basically, at this point, my husband and I, he's working tonight, or he would be here, we just feel really deceived and lied to about this whole thing. We are in the double digits now with attorney fees, and we're at our max at what we can pay. We've literally used our entire winter savings because we don't work in the winter. We're in the wedding business. And I understand that you guys have parameters, but I'm just asking you if there's any way you can grant this for us so we can get out of this, because we're not going to have enough money to see this through. And it's just really been one of the worst things that we've ever been through in our life. And they actually moved into the house beside us. So they are our neighbors now, and we have to see them every day. And why they moved into the house for 6 weeks when it's for sale, they put it back up for sale. They had to take it down when code compliance came out, and now it's back up and they're our neighbors. So it's literally been a nightmare. I know that there's only so much you guys can do, but I appreciate you listening to me. And I know that they knew, and they had it on the market for so long, and they knew what to tell us to make us want to buy this house, and they never thought that these neighbors down the street would call us in over the shed, and they did, and that's how it was exposed. And I think they really thought that nobody would ever find out. I just wanted to get it off my chest. It's been about 6 months, and we're in double digits with attorney fees for something that we didn't even do, and we have no end in sight and have no idea how we're ever gonna get made whole from this at this point.
We appreciate you very much coming and sharing your story. We appreciate that this thing come to head because I think we have a good board to understand that the position here. And we're hoping that this is gonna be successful to you. But I do hope personally that your attorney will go after your attorney fees. And I think the emotional damage that she has suffered is pretty obvious, should be worth a couple, $300,000 or $400,000 from the builder. And I hope that he files a lawsuit against them. You need to get something from the builder to make sure that this does not continue. Trust me, if we ever get the opportunity, most likely other than this, I would love to educate him.
Well, we found out that this was the first home that they have built on their own. They were actually joint builders with some other well-known builders in the area, but I don't know if maybe that went south, but this is the first one they built on their own, so they were really eager to make a sale, and I guess when they see a young couple, I guess they just saw that, and then just to know that there's some things going on beside us, we don't know all the details, and I don't want to speak to that or say anything, but I wouldn't want anyone ever to get in the same situation that we're in, like a family or something. They buy that house and then there's a problem just like ours.
We're gonna try to see if we can't help make sure that doesn't happen. Stephen?
Other Stephen. There was something else I did want to put into the record for you guys, just so you have it.
Is that the case where you filed lawsuit?
No, sir, not that one. This is a letter from the Sacred Oak subdivision in support of the variance.
This is a letter from who?
The Sacred Oak subdivision, and it's in support of the variance. That is the subdivision they live in.
At the homeowner association is the person that built this house is the president of it?
She was at one point. She's not the president anymore, but she is on the architectural review committee who approved the site
Any
plan.
consideration to that letter?
Well, she's not on the board anymore at all. She's just on the architectural review committee. This is actually from the homeowners association.
I guess it'd be appealed to the appellate court and it'd be overturned if I don't allow it, right, neighbor?
Could be exhibit, applicant's exhibit 4.
So entered. Is that all you gonna,
All right, that's all I've got for you right now. If you've got any questions, I'm here.
Stephen?
I'm making a mess.
Stephen Schoen.
Good evening. If I could have the staff report entered into the record, please.
So entered, Stephen.
Great, thank you. With the recent submitted documents, there does appear to be a less intense encroachment into the wetland buffer. Certainly when it's compared to the original, which was 0, down to 8 or 14 feet is certainly better than that. Again, there is a need for a variance request for the shed. It is encroaching into the rear and the side setbacks, as noted in the updates in the staff report that you have in front of you. Staff is certainly conscious that contractors and developers go outside of the realm of the code, and oftentimes homeowners are left cleaning up some of these messes. As far as staff's concerned, it was not established whether the contractor did it or not. Mr. Tatum certainly testified to that. And if that's the case, then there is additional sympathies from staff for the predicament the homeowners are in. However, the request does not satisfy the minimum variance requirements of the code as 1.16.036.
I understand that, Stephen, but Walden County has placed a lot of hardships on people to build houses. I think that Walden County is one of the most difficult places to get plans approved because of the oversight that the planning department tries to make sure, I guess, in their mind it's done correctly. The problem I keep having is, the surveys required when you submit your plans, is that correct?
Correct.
Surveys required whenever you take and have your foundation, correct?
Correct.
And then you're supposed to have a survey, a final survey, is that correct?
Correct.
What's the use of having all this hardship of expense if these contractors continue to do this type of work and it's not being caught? To me, it's just an expense and the county's not doing their position. Is it not correct that the county hired someone to go out and to review the building site so these items would not, isn't that what Mr. Carter's position is for?
You're right. Yes, Jacob does review and inspect stormwater systems and DOs. He's the DO inspector as long.
Okay, what's the DO?
So a development or, excuse me, you know, not for a single residential site, but for a subdivision.
So there's nobody to oversight on the building lot? There's no one here to protect this person from the time that permit is pulled?
No, there are inspections that occur throughout. And as far as my understanding of this particular situation, the final approval of the site and the structure occurred prior to the filling, sodding, fencing, and shed construction. So they wouldn't have been caught during normal processes.
Holding pond. I mean, the retaining wall.
That's correct. Yes,
It
sir.
was built afterwards.
That's my understanding.
Let me ask you this question. If a contractor is doing this, he gets the house permitted, he gets through the CO of it, he comes back and he's in violation, he sells it, but yet he goes next door and able to pull a permit, and you knowing that he did this to this lot, shouldn't he be stopped by the violation that he has occurred on the lot? Isn't there something in the code of the contractor says if you intentionally cause harm that you can't continue to build?
I believe you're right in that. I'm not super familiar with the code that contractors are obliged to follow. I can say that from my experience, the folks that review these plans aren't necessarily aware when there are outstanding issues like this with the particular contractor or not. So they could violate the code in one lot. A separate reviewer may have reviewed this in the next lot that they build on. They may not know there's a variance application that's going through the process. That there's many ways that something like this could be missed.
Do they have a variance application on the lot next door?
It sounds like they have a code enforcement action against that lot. I have not received a variance application.
Sure.
Do these buildings have plumbing and electrical in them?
I imagine so. Oh, the sheds, I don't know about that.
Do they have any plumbing or electrical in them?
Electrical, but not plumbing.
Because it was my understanding, and it may have changed, but if you could build a shed up to 400 square foot without a permit.
Not in South Walton.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nothing across the bay?
No, above the bay or north of the bay, there is a 400 square foot threshold there for permitting purposes. Yep.
I don't think it's the issue of the permit on the building, it's the issue
No, I
that
understand.
he went into the wetland buffer knowingly and built a retaining wall and filled it.
And then he testified, or somebody testified that the DEP had come down and said they didn't have a problem with the retaining wall?
The Corps of Engineers.
Corps of Engineers.
We don't go by
You know,
your
at
side.
some point that converts from being, you can see all the docks out there, it goes from being the bay to being a wetland. And so you would have a 50-foot mean high water setback and you would be allowed to build a seawall on the bay, but not in the wetland. So I don't know that some of the walls that are closer to the opening of the bayou there aren't allowable as a seawall, whereas this is a wetland situation. But I think that the thing that I'm most concerned about is the building is completely within the platted wetland setback, and it's my interpretation that regardless of what their wetland consultant says, if it's on the plat, is this was where the wetland was when they created the subdivision and they platted that 25-foot setback, that's a hard setback. So the variance that we would be granting would be for the platted 25-foot wetland setback, not for the adjusted wetland line.
My understanding is that a plat can't be varied from, but you would be, if approving the variance, it would allow for that encroachment into the wetland buffer that is, in the code, right? So where that sits in the plat, I'm not sure, is necessarily the way that the board should be looking at it in that respect. I have indicated in the staff report that if approved, there may be a need for replatting, for a minor replat to adjust that line. I honestly, I'm not 100% sure on that. That's why I said may in there. It's not a hard stance. It's something that I think we would have to work out internally if the board approved it.
I think Mr. Hall would like to speak. He's standing behind.
Please do.
You standing behind him because you want to say something?
Well, I thought I'd help Mr. Chick with his question. if I
Sure,
could,
Mr.
Mr.
Hall,
Chairman.
state your name for the record.
My name is Steve Hall. I'm the county land use attorney for the moment.
Glad to see you.
Glad to be here. Mr. Chick, I think you may be, and certainly Mr. Burgess may be familiar over the period of years, how often we've had policies change on what needs to be included on the face of a plat. As you know, the platting statute doesn't require these kinds of additions in order to have a valid plat, showing wetland buffers, preservation areas. We use it as a kind of a combination between the DO and what is a traditional plat. We don't, as in this case, if you look at this, the lots are just taken along these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here along the wetlands buffer in phase 1 where we're working. You won't find a surveyed wetland or mean high water line anywhere but over here on the bayou. What you have is what are treated as upland retaining walls, long straight line that's included as a part of the original development or subdivision plan. And then they treat that upland retaining wall as a de facto mean high water line or wetland jurisdictional line.
Okay.
That's why we have such a nice straight line on the 25-foot wetlands buffer. It doesn't reflect what a scientific or biological determination on what the actual wetland boundary would be. But we accept it and we allow them to put it on the plat. So a buyer deals with that 25-foot wetland setback buffer as it's shown on the plat. Is that something that is a irrevocable part of the plat when we show a wetland buffer on the plat for any given subdivision? I believe that in this case where we've gotten actual survey data as of a given date on a wetland jurisdictional line, that can control over what's shown as a artificial line on the plat. I would assume, based on my experience over the years, of what happened here was this seawall was viewed as an upland retaining wall and therefore didn't require jurisdictional permitting. If the Corps came out, they said, oh no, that's an upland retaining wall. We don't have any jurisdiction over it. And that would kind of lend some credence to the fact that the actual jurisdictional line that was surveyed, flagged and surveyed, was the actual boundary of the wetlands.
Right.
And then we had the backfill and the sodding and everything that always comes in afterwards when you have an upland retaining wall. An upland retaining wall? We don't know. It can't be determined by the plat. But whoever did this plat and accepted this plat used that as kind of a shortcut on how to get to the 25-foot buffer. Doesn't invalidate it, but if we have more particular information available, I don't think it's unfair to utilize that more particular information.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Stephen, real quickly, you have anything else to add?
No, I don't, sir.
Thank you. Anybody from the board?
Anybody in the audience have
I'm asking you, do you have anything for Stephen?
No more
before we
questions.
stand in for Stephen? Anyone else has anything to say? Anyone for or not? Stephen, you have something to
I have one
close?
more thing.
You have something for Stephen?
I did want to address one thing Mr. Chick did say, though, about the other retaining walls that were built down there at the docks. The wetland buffer is actually shown on the plat that goes all the way down there, even though Mr. Hall touched on that. It is shown on the plat for those lots all the way down. So even if it were an upland retaining wall, it's still in the buffer zone. And I've got the plat I can move in if you would like to see it.
And this aerial map with the dimension on it isn't exactly, you know, lining up with the plat. So
Yeah, they're gonna be a little
17
off.
feet is,
Yeah. But probably not 8 feet off. Usually they're only a couple off.
okay.
I apologize, Bill. Do you have anything to say?
Oh, good.
I apologize. That's great. Anyone else? Anybody have anything? Close the public discussion.
Motion to close.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
We have the wetland buffer, and we also have the side buffer, 2 side buffers, right, Jeff?
Right, there's a side setback and the wetland setback violation.
We have a motion,
A motion to approve the variance request within the wetlands buffer as shown on the record plat. A side setback reduction from 7.5 feet to 3.4 feet, and a rear setback reduction from 15 feet to 3.1 feet.
You're referencing the survey?
Referencing the survey of record, or as introduced as evidence, applicant's item number 1 and 2.
to clarify, explain to me what you're on the wetland buffer, or you saying the one that's on the plat, or you saying the one that was presented?
I agree with Mr. Chick. Unless you replat that lot, the wetlands buffer is a
Control.
controlling line unless it were replatted.
That's what you,
That is what, yes, I'm saying within the wetland buffer as on the record plat.
second,
I had a question.
second,
Second,
now, what's the question?
did you have anything to add about the building?
I did. I I said the building was, the variance was, make a motion to approve the variance within the platted wetlands buffer, a side setback reduction from 7.5 to 3.4, and a rear from 15 to 3.1.
Okay, would you change that variance to just be for just that shed?
Yes, let me append that. For the shed as in place, again referenced as in the applicant's submitted items number 1 and 2,
That'll be attached to the final order.
and attached to the final order.
So are we saying leave it like it is? Is that what you're-
Yes,
Yes.
discussion?
The only addition that I would suggest that we make is that the structure be inspected by the building department for conformity with the hurricane trapping requirements for uplift.
It'll have to get permitted anyway, so this just allows it to stay where it's at.
That works.
Okay. And I do
We've
believe,
already closed it, and I just want to move along, be honest with you. Yeah, what now? Since you're a county staff attorney, I will allow it.
On your motion, you're referring to the platted line that's shown on Exhibit 1 and 2,
yes, sir.
not the revised line that's based on the mean high water line, or I'm sorry, the wetland jurisdictional line survey.
That is correct.
Okay, that's what I needed.
Discussion, anyone else? I have a motion and a second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
You receive your variance. Provided that you file a lawsuit. Why did you oppose? Why do
get all bowed up about it.
No, I mean, did I miss something? Never mind.
I'll tell you about it later.
Mr. Chairman?
Huh?
I don't know if this is the right place for it or not, but maybe Walton County could vote and require occupational licenses for contractors of varying, be it commercial builders. And if we encounter these in the future, you can suspend an occupational license for a period of time.
Let's
have-
discuss this afterwards, before we close it. What? Make him mad, he quit?
And I need to go to the restroom.
Did he quit?
I'm quitting with
Did you quit? We're gonna take a 5-minute break.
We don't have enough board members.
Stephen, can we adjust the air
It's a good
conditioner?
suggestion on the, they do that most everywhere else.
The only thing about occupational license, when you start that, they're gonna start charging one management, management group. Are you part of the Dixie Managing Group? Do you have your little badge so we can make sure you with the proper authority? Okay, come on up then. State your name for the record.
Pamela Dixon.
What can we do for you tonight?
I am requesting a side setback variance from 7.5 feet to 5 feet on Lot 1 LaGrange Street Road.
Why do you want it?
This lot is very narrow. To be uniform with the houses in the surrounding areas and with the parking for his extra long truck that he has, to make the house work with that truck, we need the extra 2.5 feet.
What kind of wide truck does he have?
He has a long bed F-250.
And he has it for work purposes?
Yes, sir.
And it'd be a hardship for him to get rid of his truck?
Yes, sir.
Would it be possible for them to pull straight into the garage instead of having a side access garage?
The way that the lot is set up, it's a long, narrow lot, so the house has to sit long ways. It does not face the road.
Why couldn't
There's
the
no-
garage doors face the road?
Be uniform with the other houses in the neighborhood. That's how they're all set up, and that's the complaint that we've had, is that they want everything to be uniform.
Is there an HOA?
No, sir, there's not an HOA. It's the neighboring houses want everything to be uniform on that road. And to not make waves with the neighbors, we're trying to make everything as uniform as possible.
So basically, go ahead, Jeff, are you through?
I'm through.
Basically, you have a narrow lot.
Yes, sir.
You want to drive in and turn into your driveway.
Yes, sir.
You want to do that, please your neighbors. To do that, you got to have a 2.5 foot variance on the side. That's what you ask.
Yes, sir.
Is the house built?
No, sir.
Good deal. Anything else you want to add?
No, the only other thing that I would like to add is that we have had complaints that my client should have to purchase 2 lots to, not have the setback, but it's not, there's no way he can purchase 2 lots because the owner on the left-hand side has 2 lots and the owner on the right-hand side has 2 lots. So he's in the middle of those. There's nowhere he can purchase any more land.
Till someone stands before this board and complain, we're not going to give that any consideration. So if it's
Okay.
not, so if they get up and talk about it, then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Have a seat up front right there. Stephen, what do you think about this variance request? It's nice to have someone come and ask before they build it and sell it, isn't it?
That is always a good thing, I think. If I could have the staff report entered in the record, please.
So entered.
Thank you. Staff has determined, based on the application submitted, that the minimum variance requirements of the code have not been satisfied. While the lot certainly is a tad skinny, it is not much different, if any, from most of the lots surrounding, and homes have been built on those lots as well. It just it just doesn't satisfy those minimum requirements, sir.
How wide is that lot?
Looks, what am I looking at here? 40 feet and some change? Is that correct?
It looks like, based on the dimensions on the site plan they gave us, that it's 58 feet,
Is that what I'm seeing?
Perpendicular
the
width.
body in the middle.
Is this not a subdivision that was recorded back in the 70s, or is this one that was recorded in the 80s? Is this not off of down around
This-
Freeport?
Unfortunately, the size of the lot restricts it from the 5-foot reduced.
Pardon me?
The size of the lot restricts it from that 5-foot side reduction.
Side.
It's
Square
over
footage.
10,000 square.
It has to be less than 10,000.
But when was it platted?
That should be, looks like it was platted in 92.
That rule only applies if it's less.
Prior to 1971.
Right.
When?
Platted in the 70s, right. I think it's 75, so it doesn't meet the time frame nor the
Platted
size.
92,
That's correct, sir.
50 foot wide.
Approximately, it looks like.
If you had a 7.5-foot side setback and a 23-foot deep garage, there would be 27.5 feet to back a truck in and out of the garage. I would recommend that they not have a double garage door and have a single 20-foot wide garage door so that the large truck could turn and get in and out of the garage. But I don't see a problem backing in and out of the garage in 27.5 feet. Grocery store parking lane is 24 foot wide, and that leaves them a couple feet for landscaping between the pavers and the property line. So I just don't see where a hardship exists, other than the design of the building does not accommodate the vehicle correctly.
Stephen, you have anything else to add?
No, just that I would agree with Mr. Schick's assessment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone here would like to comment on this? Any neighbors, anyone supportive? Come on up, state your name for the record. Come up. Come up. State your name for the record.
Fritz Harrington.
Harrington, what-
I own a lot directly adjacent to it, and I live 2 lots over. And when I built my home within the meets and bounds that the county recommends. I have my setbacks. I too drive a long truck.
you drive a F-250?
I do, yes.
Extended
It's sitting right out here now.
Extended
Oh, yeah,
bed?
everything, yeah. But at any rate, you know, these lots are small, but all one has to do is to build and design within the meets and bounds of the lot, and everything works. I had to build mine, so it fit. I have 8 feet on each side of my house. I have a neighbor to the right of me building a house. He's building his 8 feet off the line. And we really don't want everything squeezing in tighter and tighter. There are safety considerations as far as one house catching on fire, catching another on fire. There's just many, many incidents of that happening recently. So I'm against this variance. And I'm a neighbor,
You're a close neighbor,
very close.
very
Uh-huh,
close
yeah.
neighbor. We appreciate you coming.
Yes,
Thank
sir,
you.
thank you.
Anyone else would like to speak? Anyone for or anyone against? Ma'am, come back up, please. How big a house is he building? 47.3 feet wide and a 50-foot lot.
Can we not slide the building closer to the bay? I'm under the impression it's only a 50-foot setback, and it looks like you're sitting about 150 foot back off the water.
We have discussed that. We have discussed moving the house back further. But to add to what Mr. Fritz said, as, you know, squeezing everything in there, he does own 2 lots. He owns the lot directly, you know, next door to my client, and he owns the lot next to his, and his house is on the farther lot, so it's not squeezed in there. Same with Mr. Edwards on the the left-hand side. So they're not gonna be squeezed in there. And we have talked about moving the house back further towards the bay.
Because that
We-
lot is getting wider
It-
as you get
it
closer.
does. It
so
does, yes,
The more
sir.
you move it back towards that 50-foot setback, the easier it's gonna be for him to get in and out. But 27.5 feet, and I drive a 2500 pickup truck as well, and I think it's more than adequate to turn and park, which I did out here in the parking lot.
Yes,
And
sir.
so I
Yes,
think
sir.
you can, I would recommend a double garage door instead of two singles.
Separate?
And that way you can cut the wheel sooner and
Yes, sir. But as my client stated, he wants to be uniform with the rest of the houses on the road. So that is his hardship. I can't speak for his hardship.
He should have came.
Yes, sir.
And uniform also means that everybody else has a 7.5-foot setback.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. You want to add anything else? Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Motion to close it, public discussion.
Motion to close?
Second,
Second.
all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Motion,
Motion to deny?
second.
Second.
You don't count. Good. Discussion,
I fail to see the hardship. The survey was performed and accurately reports the 7.5-foot setback in April. The house plans are dated in July. I think everybody was well aware of it and the 7.5-foot setback, and it's hard for me to see a hardship on a vacant lot.
Charlie? Charlie?
I don't have anything.
Neighbors in opposition and having dealt with narrow lots, I think that there's a way to solve this problem with a better design.
Have a motion and second. Motion to deny, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You did not get your variance. He's gonna have to live by the setback. Thank you for done. You did a good job presenting it. Thank you, ma'am. Next item on the agenda. Key variance. This variance application submitted by SM Consulting and Expediting. Come up, ma'am. Have a good night.
Good evening, Stephanie Manning on behalf of Mr. and Miss James Key of 367 Sparkleberry Lane. I'll try to make this brief. I know you guys have several in line. Mr. Key hired a foundation contractor to pour his foundation. He's doing an owner-builder permit on their forever home they've saved up all these years. They go to build, they pull their permit, foundation guy comes out, Mr. Key tells him, check, double check, triple check. I want to be 1 foot off of the setback. Foundation guy continues on, calls Mr. Key, says, hey, we're good, we've got you poured. They do the survey. As you guys know, the surveyors are forever behind at the moment, so they continued on moving up with their foundation. You laugh because you know I'm right.
Perpetually.
So they continue on, roof's on, they're going along, the survey finally comes in. Mr. Key is shocked to find out that he's built at 6 feet. The required setback was 7.5 feet. He calls the foundation guy up. Foundation guy says, no, Mr. Key, I've got you at 6 feet. You're 5 foot setback with a foot. So then here my phone rings. Contractor calls me up. He says, hey, Steph, can you please tell my client the setbacks out here are 5 feet? He's half acre. It's an old subdivision. I said, how big is that? He said, half acre. I said, it doesn't apply. So we pulled the plat to make sure, lo and behold, no setbacks listed. So they're stuck with 7.5 on their sides. Mr. Key is kind of stuck at the moment because he has no recourse, and this is their final home. They've spent their entire life savings on it. This isn't a moneymaker. This isn't a rental, an investment. This is their final home for retirement, and it's built in 1.5 feet in the setback. They're requesting to reduce the east side setback to 6 feet. You can stipulate it just for the home. They're not wanting any other structures built, just this final. They've already got their shed built. They want the house to be able to get a CO.
Have they stopped construction?
Yes, sir. They have ceased, once they found out that there was an issue, they have ceased construction.
Who's your contractor that made this
It was-
intentional problem?
It was a foundation, concrete, Davenport construction out of Funiac.
Davenport?
Yes, sir.
Never heard of. Huh? I ain't never heard of.
Mr. Key is here if you guys have any questions.
Sure.
Mr. McKinley is going to recuse himself on this one. He just advised me he rents property to the owner of Davenport Construction, so he just wants to go ahead and not participate on this matter.
Okay,
No, I mean, like I rent a house to him.
all right. It's hard for Charlie not to say nothing. Where's Mr. Key at?
Mr. Key is back here.
Come up and talk to us, Mr. Key. I want to hear your side of the story. First of all, I really appreciate you being here. I just don't have too much respect for builders or homeowners that don't show up and participate in the process. So thank you for coming. So, you know, help me understand why we should help you here. Give me a reason.
Well, we got all the plans approved and all, and the setbacks and all were obvious. I gave Mr. Davenport 2 sets of plans, and he built the foundation, and I assumed everything was fine because he had 2 sets of plans, and he was a reputable, I think, contractor because of the people down at Frank's Cash and Carry had used him before, and Zach down there recommended him to me. So I assumed he was well thought of also, and he was.
Have you built houses before?
I have. I certainly have. I built 2 before, many years ago when I lived in Alabama.
Build them to live in and then,
Oh, no, I live, still have that one, or it has been, I got divorced in the house up there, just stayed up.
you provided opportunity for your ex to have a place to live.
No, she got the house.
I understand, trust me. So you did everything you could do to make sure that you did this right. You
Yes,
went
sir,
to the
every-
right people and you got good advice and you was hoping to God you did you a good job. And you trusted that he did. When you found out there's a problem, you stopped building.
Oh, absolutely. I haven't moved in 2 months. I've been
Really,
sitting.
really appreciate that. Thank you, sir. You want to add anything else?
I have a question. Is it on a crawl space?
It does have a crawl space in it. It has, I think, 2 rows of piers in it, and it has steel in them and bars that loop over the frame.
Are
of the
those flood
foundation.
vents that I see in there, or is that just for ventilation of the crawl space?
It's just entry to
So
the.
you had shifted the building over to get it out of the flood zone, is that correct?
No, sir, I don't, the flood zone is past my lot there.
Looks like in one of these aerials that there is an AE flood zone that takes up a good chunk of the,
From what I understood, it begins, okay.
so by shifting the building over, you were able to get it away from this section of flood zone here.
I believe the flood zone, if you're facing the lot, it would be on your right, the flood zone, because it slopes down towards the bayou out there.
Okay.
Let me ask you, who was responsible for laying out the building?
Mr. Davenport.
So, back to what direction, just go lay out the building, or you tell him what you want to set back to the property line?
Oh, well, he saw that there was 7.5 foot on the plans. So, that was my understanding, and I would assumed it was his understanding because I wanted him to go by the plans, of course. Found out when he did the survey, he didn't, he whatever his reason was, he missed it 18 inches, I think.
Like to me, he thought it was a 5-foot setback.
Hey, I don't know, his thinking, I couldn't say that, I don't know.
I wish y'all would have told him he needed to be here tonight since it was postponed from last meeting. Oh, boy, I'd like to educate him.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all want to? No? Have a seat.
Thank you.
Stephen?
If I could have the staff report entered into the record, please. Thank you. Yeah, this does appear, based on the application, to be a construction or survey error. You know, the house appears to be kind of slanted, a portion of it's in the setback. It seems like an obvious mistake. Unfortunately, section 1.16.03 does not account for construction and survey errors, and this application does not satisfy the minimum code requirements for variance approval, that is.
Whenever we have issues, and we appreciate what you do in your position, we understand that, and this is one of those times that, you know, I really appreciate your advice on it. But when people creates these problems, and they don't want to come before this board and defend that position, unfortunately, it's been postponed one time before, and I sure would love to postpone it again and demand that the guy be here. And I think we can do that, can we, Hayward? Being a quasi-judicial that he has to come and appear, but anyway, that's another topic. Can't we request a letter be sent to Mr. Davenport that if this board had not, let's assume, maybe we ought to wait. Let me wait till we get through, then we're gonna have this discussion, because I don't want to do anything that I shouldn't do. So you have a seat, just remind me to come back to this. Anybody has any question? Anybody else has anything else to say? Anyone for or against this variance? Motion to close the public discussion.
Motion to close.
Second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion.
Motion to grant the variance as applied.
Second. Discussion.
Well, as motive for my motion, I do believe there's a hardship. We did hear a portion of this discussion last meeting, but we only had 4 members, and it was advised that maybe we continue. Mr. Hayward says it is admissible, even the discussion that we had, which is much the same. I don't believe the owner was aware of this. He didn't create the situation for himself. It's not self-imposed. Separate and aside discussion, yes, maybe back to the occupational licenses or some method of enforcement to the responsible parties. But the hardship being the extreme cost it would be to somehow bring this into compliance. It's not just a wall or a foundation. You know, it's basically a dried-in home. So I think the hardship is not self-imposed, economically not feasible to repair, and that's my motive for the motion.
Charlie?
Charlie can't participate.
Oh, that's right. Jeff, anything?
Well, I think the size of the lot, he didn't gain anything by the mistake being made by the contractor, benefit him. And the lack of anybody here to protest variance, it's favorable.
I agree with that. I being that no one tested it, I have a little bit of a problem. Doing the house, I don't know all the. I think it's hard to.
Oh,
Yeah, I agree that it's a hardship out of his control, and I even think if we got Mr. Davenport here, I don't think we could do anything to him.
We educate him, and we can do
Well,
something to him.
we couldn't do nothing to him, because even if we hold these people's house up, they can get a judgment on him, but that's not worth a crap. And, I mean,
Well, I beg to differ.
well, I mean, if you, I know a lot of people that's got judgments, and they don't have no money.
Can't continue the house, they can't build in the house.
That's what I'm saying,
He
if
will
we
either,
don't grant the judgment.
he will either pay to have it fixed, or they could file a lawsuit against him.
Yeah, but what good's a lawsuit, Joe, if he can't pay
What
it?
good is having regulations if you don't enforce them?
He's not even a licensed contractor. I mean, he's not a contractor, he's just a concrete man. He does foundation.
I respect the fact that the seller or the owner of the property come before us tonight. I understand that he stopped construction. I really appreciate that, and I, appreciate the situation he's in. And I still think anytime someone creates a problem, they need to come before this board. Pool people, concrete, whoever, but that's, and surveyors, but that's my position. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Sir, you got your variance.
Do you remember those JD's towers in Destin?
Yeah.
You know, the state takes action against architects and engineers that make mistakes.
No.
I think that the county should probably make it to where they can't start framing until after that foundation survey comes.
We don't need no more regulation. Good
What's the
Lord.
point of turning in a foundation survey?
Sir, Stephen, would it be
Actually,
asking too
you gotta
much
turn your
for the
mic
planning
on.
department to take and write Mr. Davenport a letter that, in my opinion, and Hayward can verify this, that if this board did not approve this variance, that he would be required to move the foundation?
I don't know the place of the planning department when it comes to drafting a letter.
How else you gonna educate them that they are responsible for their actions?
That's a good question, sir.
Why don't we do like Alabama and do away with all these rules and regulations, just let us build?
I'd be out of a
I would
job.
like that. See, they don't- That's the point, they don't need you, 'cause in Alabama, the houses stand up. Thank you, Stephen.
No. Vote with your feet.
Lord have mercy. Where are we at? Botanic Miramar Beach Conditional Use. I hope and pray to, state your name for the record.
Robert Kaufman with Dunlap and Shipman on behalf of Davis Development LLC.
I would appreciate if you get to the point and not just on and on and on. So we're gonna get to the point?
If you mean the point is Melissa's presentation, we'll get to the point pretty quickly.
No, I want you to do it. You're not gonna do it?
Sure. I let the people who know what they're talking about do those types
Oh,
of
well,
things.
what you here for? Well, I wanted you to get to the point. This is the point, that, and we getting going.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, we're here on a conditional use. It is submitted in conjunction with a major development order application that's been through TRC recently with all comments addressed. It is for a conditional use in the general commercial land use district. The conditional use is permitted by section, it's 2.0215D of the Land Development Code, and specifically for long-term, 321 long-term rental multifamily apartments with 20% workforce housing. Essentially, as we look at the code, this is a primary use if you put commercial on the first floor of the multifamily with the workforce housing. But what the applicant is proposing is to concentrate all of the commercial uses for this development up on the 98 commercial corridor. The property fronts Highway 98, and then it will be exclusively residential multifamily in the rear of the development. The project sits on approximately 25 acres of what was originally a 35-acre development down in Miramar Beach. Most folks are familiar with it because it's the still operating golf garden project. The rear 10 acres have already been deeded to the county for use as a future public park. If the major development order is approved, there'll be a dedicated road to the county along the eastern side of that development to go from 98 up to the park. So the plan is for a well-designed, well-buffered residential component that I was just mentioning to the north behind the commercial component on the 98 corridor. To approve this, the code provides three main considerations that you have to find, the applicant has to demonstrate to be entitled to the conditional use. The first of those is a showing of need specifically for the housing and the workforce housing, which Ms. Ward is going to demonstrate with the presentation. Another is compatibility with the adjacent uses, and we believe this is going to not just maintain but enhance compatibility with the adjacent uses, because what you have is you have the future park use to the north, you have existing single-family residential subdivision over here to the west, and what this does is concentrates an exclusively residential component nearer to those uses while keeping the commercial up on Highway 98. The third component is that the necessary supporting infrastructure has to exist to support the conditional use. What we're talking about here is a change in use from commercial to residential. We're not moving around structures. We're not changing the overall project layout. So when we're talking about necessary supporting infrastructure, we're really talking about the fact that it is undergoing major development order review. It's been through TRC with all comments addressed. The Planning Commission and the BCC ultimately is going to have to approve all of the infrastructure. Other limitations in the code that this project complies with, the multifamily component cannot exceed 17 units per acre. The proposal here is for under 13 units per acre. The proposed is 321 out of 425, I believe, is the maximum that would be permissible under that particular restriction. And the proposal, the multifamily development, does have to have at least the 20% workforce housing component.
Hang on a minute. You said 425 is the total that you will have, or?
That would be the maximum permissible at 17 an acre. The proposed is
allowable.
Correct. The proposed is 321.
So you proposing less?
Yes, sir. Yeah, the maximum 17 an acre. This works out to less than 13 an acre. And again, though, to focus the question for the board's consideration tonight, it is essentially the residential component located to the north. This would, we believe, be approached as a primary use of which there's an entitlement in the general commercial zone if there was if it was a mixed-use building, if there was a first-floor commercial component with residential located on top of it. However, applicant is proposing that those buildings to the rear are going to be entirely residential, the multifamily long-term rental apartments. A PowerPoint presentation has been handed out. I'd like to submit that as applicants 1. And also, I know Mr. Schoen will introduce the staff report, but I'd like to indicate that we also intend to rely on the staff report, including specifically the letter from Public Works indicating no outstanding comments to the infrastructure. Thank you.
That was short and good. Good point.
Melissa Ward for Dunlap and Chipman. Do y'all need me to speak? He did a very good job, didn't he? So I'm going to start this PowerPoint presentation. He gave you a nice overview of the project, and for the this is the way this is laid out on the site plan, but this is what we're talking about. But he's mentioning to the south, this is the park that they saw. And in the center is the multifamily, and then to the south is the...
Now, park or a golf course?
It's existing as a golf course today. It was sold, 10 acres was sold to the county. It's going to be a park for whatever purposes they choose.
Already got grass and ponds and everything in place, ready to go.
Yep.
That's the Tony Anderson's park.
That is the Tony Anderson Park, yes. And in that, so let me just turn this on. I think she told me to do like that. Okie dokie. So this is the first time I've done a PowerPoint. I have to look behind me, so I'm going to try to follow along with my own pages. Thank you for letting me come here today to talk to you about this. What we have to do is discuss the need for it and the the conditional use part of it. The code says under general commercial that your, sorry, it's stapled, that your primary use under general commercial allows for multifamily development. And that multifamily, in this case, obviously, what we're proposing are apartments. And when you look at where the apartments are in Walton County, you have a nice little cluster of apartments in Defuniak, and then one or two sets of apartments recently, more recently so, in Freeport. And then in the south end, technically, the only apartments that showed up when we did the search were two, which is the Sanctuary and Terramar. Those are the two most recognizable in Walton County. And we're going to talk about those a little bit in the future, but the point of that is that the Sanctuary right now is under 300 apartments, and we're going to talk about those rental rates and what that means for Walton County employees, people who, not the employees of Walton County, but people who work and live here at the same time. The work for Walton,
Melissa,
in the right direction. Yes, sir.
Can I just interrupt for a second? The issue that you need a variance for is to separate the commercial from the residential component?
It's not, well, okay, so the primary use specifically says that you can have multifamily up to 17 units per acre, provided that it's in a mixed-use structure. And in that same language, and it says subject to subsection G. Subsection G says that you have to, residential requires a conditional use. And we discussed at length what that meant and how we were interpreting it, and I discussed it with Stephen and we discussed it with Mac. When they originally made application for this, in fact, when they sold the property, when they first got the land use amendment for this property, and we're kind of jumping ahead in this, so I'll just go ahead and go through it. When they were going through the process, this is what it was always going to be. They always were marketing this as this is a good place for some multifamily development. During that process, even during the pre-application and after we submitted the application, no one ever mentioned that we had to have a conditional use first. Because of the way the code is written, it's just poorly done language. Mac's interpretation is residential requires a conditional use. Our thought was, because of the way it was written, is that to have that commercial down on the front on 98 is the conditional use. Because listed under primary, it says you can have multifamily at 17 units per acre. And then, and that's how we decided to present that this evening. The conditional, regardless of how you look at it, this is a conditional use. And that condition that we're speaking to is that because we're looking for some compatibility measures, it is more appropriate to have commercial along Highway 98 and away from the neighborhoods in the back and along the side, to reduce the amount of traffic going down into the subdivision.
So you're allowed to have residential and commercial on the property?
It's a mixed-use development. That's correct.
But the
Mac's
technical language
interpretation.
is that those two things need to be interwoven in the same structure?
In the language, it talks about a mixed-use building. When we talked about how we're moving forward with that, he said he felt like that met the same criteria, that we would have a mixed-use development, and the commercial, as a part of this conditional use, could be on 98. So I think it's a part of that conditional use approval, should you find it appropriate.
Right, so you're within the limits of density on the number of residential units, and you have your commercial component, and you've located it on 98 where all of the other commercial is on 98.
Correct.
And you need a variance.
It's not a variance, it's a conditional use.
Criteria is different.
Okay.
So for clarification, in case this is a topic, a variance requires that we have a hardship that's not self-created and that it's usually implemented by the land. A conditional use is that this is allowable use, provided we meet certain criteria. And that criteria includes a showing of need, compatibility, and the appropriateness. And our compatibility measure is to move that commercial to the Highway 98. And that was discussed a little bit in the next slide. The site for the proposed use is adequate in size, shape to accommodate said use in all yard spaces. This is 25 acres with adequate buffering and area in order to support both of the mixture of uses as well as the stormwater systems and so on, and the road that's necessary to go down into the park for the county. that the proposed use relates to the streets and highways that we have adequate infrastructure. Because it fronts on Highway 98, we are adequately situated to be able to accommodate that particular type of development. And that, that we would have necessary buffering for adjacent uses. As you can see, there's quite a bit of buffering around the building itself to the nearest building to the west. Here, about 200 feet. To the property line is 100 feet, a little over 100 feet. And then, and also the same on the other side. So we've had at least 100 feet from building to property line, additional 100 feet to the nearest structure. The conditional use breakdown, it speaks to what we're talking about in this particular layout is a commercial, a multifamily, and a park. The buffer created to the north is that county park. That's 10 acres of unobstructed area between the neighborhood to the north that's on the bay and to the development for the multifamily. Staging of the commercial on the highway for the additional layer of removal from the neighborhood communities. In specifics, we then have a residential community within walking distance to some type of commercial there, but keeping the commercial away from the residential in the rear or to the west. And then the residential component, as I mentioned, has a 100-foot buffer.
Explain to me, you said something about the park. What was that? The conditional use? They had to have a park, or it was just
the 10 acres sold to the county it serves as a condition, as a buffer separating from the property that is going to be the multifamily to the neighborhood to the north, which is along the bay. There's a residential neighborhood past that along the bay.
Part of this conditional use.
It satisfies a buffering requirement. They have an additional pond to the rear that would be between, because there's a wetland back here, so there's the 10-acre park, a wetland, and a retention pond that would also continue to serve as a buffer, and the retention pond's fairly large. And we've talked about how we were proposing to separate the commercial even further from the residential to the rear and to the west, to keep it up on 98 where it is more serviceable and certainly reduces the impact into the interior neighborhood. This is the section that talks about how it was worded in the code. The primary use is allowed a vertical mixed use 17 units, residential dwelling units per 1 acre are permitted, provided that such units are located above a ground floor commercial use. Residential uses are subject to the requirements of section D below. We initially interpreted that to mean that the separation is the conditional use, and then Mac agreed with us that that is part of it, but the residential component is the conditional use. There is a factor that we have to take into consideration whenever we're talking about housing units in Walton County. And I have a few things, and it's a lot. It's kind of heavy weighted on wording, and I'd like to try to condense it a little bit. The first thing that we have is, if you're not aware, and there's a slide, I'm going to move up to that in just a few minutes, that Walton County's single-family home sales is twice what it is for the state of Florida. If you're not aware of that, the state of Florida average or median sales price for a single-family home is about $300,000. In Walton County last year, it was $600,000.
That's in South Walton.
As in Walton County. It's just the statistics. It's a median sales, yes. When you travel a little further north from South Walton to Freeport, that's quickly becoming another area where the rise in the single-family homes is going to outparse for anybody who has a lower income job or a median income job. We're talking about average income people, your fireman, your nurse. You know, we're not talking about wait staff at McDonald's. We're talking about your average person who's trying to find a place to live. The large-scale amendment that was originally applied for and approved and adopted by Walton County went from coastal center to general commercial around 2018. The dedication of the right-of-way is dedicated to Walton County for a public right-of-way. That was a part of their contract when they sold the property, the 10 acres, to the county. The the installation of a newly designated intersection where they would have an intersection light, that's a part of that contract. We are applying for a major development order application. We're entering into a development agreement to continue our relationship with the county for a 20-year process for all of these amenities and things that are a part of that original contract. And that's to say that the county has been aware for years, this is the intended use, what we are trying to achieve. And so we're just moving forward on that process.
Explain to me a 20-year agreement with the county?
So when you do any portion of your development is for moderate income workforce or affordable housing, you have a time cap that you can't turn around and sell those leases to somebody else, or you can't raise that rent beyond what's allowable by those particular markets.
You've done it for 20 years?
The developer agreement will be for 20 years.
Why 20?
That's a general development agreement. We could change it to 10. It's an agreement between the developer and the county. If they're going to if their 20% units are maxed out, then they don't raise those rents beyond up to fair market value, beyond what they might be able to afford.
20% is for the workforce.
It's moderate income housing. Yes, the workforce is a very technical term in the legislation. Workforce is 80% of the average median income, where moderate income housing is 120% of the average median income.
But the 20% is to give housing to the people that work in South Wylie.
That's correct.
You're limiting that for 20 years.
Limiting the rent level.
Rent level.
Yes.
But you still would maintain
the 20%.
That 20% workforce housing beyond the 20 years.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But the rent would go up.
The rent is allowed to go. So the rent is allowed to go up according under statutory regulations each time they do a new report and it says, well, this is the new rent. Okay, that rent's allowed to go up within those fine guidelines for moderate income housing. But beyond that, to change it to your fair market value rent, and we're going to get into some rent costs, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. When you get beyond that, you can't do that for 20 years. So your average income rental level for these homes, and there's a chart in here, so I'm just going to speed up to it so we can get to that number.
Well, I understand it, but I don't understand, you selling the ideal, and I support the ideal that this is a 20% workforce housing limited to 20 years with a rate of real estate in Walden County in the last year and 20 years, who know what the value would be. And if you don't have no workforce for those people after 20 years, because let's say the single resident in 20 years is going to be 2.3 million for a house instead of 600,000. Where are the people who are going to work? I mean, why would you
doesn't mean they
limit
have
it?
to change.
I'm asking you, why would you limit it?
Well,
Is
the
there a
county
tax
requires, under the conditional use under the conditional use and under the guidelines for doing some form of affordable housing, you are required to. That limit is 10 years. They're agreeing to go 20 years to limit the rents that they charge.
Okay,
Yeah, the requirement under the code is 10 years.
okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
The state has recognized that overall there are less than 900,000 rental units, but 100,000 of those that would have been under $1,000 a month have been lost in the last 10 years. And there's a chart here that talks about the difference in the renter versus the owners and the difference in the numbers. What's important here is that they went to 57%, they went from 57% of your units being under $1,000, and that's low income affordable housing is under $1,000, is that they've gone down, that percentage has gone down to 36% in just 2017. So Walton County is a little bit harsher than this because we don't have a lot already to start with, and our numbers have decreased as well, because investors come into the area, they buy the property, and they rent them out for good money. I mean, that's just common sense as far as an investor goes. So the moderate income housing is that 120%. And if you're looking at what the income is by this chart, And then you look at the number it's done by the number of bedrooms. And what I mostly focus on is 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. And the reason why is because Sanctuary and Miramar, the 2 most prominent apartments in South Walton, are 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. And your 1 and 2 bedroom apartment rent at 120% for 1 bedroom is less than $1,500, right? $1,494, $1,494, and a 2 bedroom is $1,791. And those are important numbers because that's the number for moderate income housing. That is to say that a person or even a couple that have a decent job at about $60,000 a year combined income can afford that house, that apartment at a 1 or 2 bedroom. These numbers break down over the years when you're looking at the 120% AMI that your average rents, again, you're looking at in 2019, if you're looking at the difference, in 2010, a 1 bedroom would have been $1,147, and by 2019 it's $1,495. So there's a slight increase that's statutorily allowed. But these are the long-term rents as of today. I looked it up. I wanted to make sure I put that slide in there as close to time as possible. Water sound origins. The difference here is the green is for a 1 bedroom and the blue, darker blue is a 2 bedroom.
Oh, you're on the wrong slide.
Sorry, I bumped it. Oh, you must, shoot. So if you'll look, your book has this page in it. I'll tell you what they are. Water sound origins, a 1 bedroom apartment, $1,500. A 2 bedroom apartment, just at $3,000. In Sanctuary, a 1 bedroom apartment is almost $2,500. A 2 bedroom apartment's almost $3,500. These are not affordable to your average income person. Your residence at 393, about $1,800. The 2 bedroom is $3,200. Your Miramar is, the 1 bedroom is almost $2,000, probably about $1,800, and your 2 bedroom is around $2,000. And Southern at Santa Rosa Beach, which just went in not too long ago, they only have 1 bedrooms listed on apartments.com because I think that's all they have left. They're still over $1,600 a month. So again, we're talking about what the range is for the average person to be able to rent in those units. And I can tell you that they are, just from personal experience, these places are booked. You can't get in right now, and you probably couldn't get in for 6 months. So people are renting them, but not the people who have to drive down every day to work down here most of the time. Some of them have roommates, that sort of thing. That's how you handle the difference. So the end, as we get closer to the end, this talks about the difference between affordable housing and moderate income housing is that truly affordable housing is subsidized by a government loan. Okay, so that manages a lot of how we handle these things. That's truly affordable housing, and by truly affordable, I mean low, really low, and low, moderate low income housing, and that's where you can't exceed like 30% of their annual income. And that's a different number. That's not what we're looking at. Moderate income housing does not require that you get a government loan. So that's what we're talking about, moderate income housing. And now you're talking about people who are not required, other than code, to limit some of their income rents, but are doing it willingly in order to make sure that for the next 20 years we provide some housing here that's available to people of a moderate income. And moderate, again, a joint income of $60,000, $65,000. So who are the people that benefit from this? Let's see if it's still, yep. Your average fireman and your average nurse, around $50,000 a piece. They could have a 1 bedroom apartment. That's the income level we're looking at. And these are the people who work at South Walton Fire District, who work at the hospital, school teachers, 2 school teachers, because school teachers still only make about $30,000 a year. Those are the people that we're looking at servicing those 20% of. This next slide, so I'll just tell you how I got these numbers. I went over to the property appraiser's website, I found my parcel. I click on it, it gives you a report. When you look at that report, if you don't do real estate every day, you can look at the sales within 1,500 feet of this property. That's where these come from. These sales were in the last couple of years, and really, only 2 of them are under $1 million. These are homes of some sort that have sold in the last couple of years, and they're at levels that there's no way anybody who works at the hospital can afford it on their own. The proposal is for long-term rentals. These are not short-term rentals. These are not vacation homes. These are people who live here and who work here. There's 321 market rate apartments, of which, 321 apartments, of which 20% are going to be for moderate income housing. So their total units include 124 one-bedroom. This is the latest site plan that we have. 124 one-bedroom, 162 bedroom, and 37 three-bedrooms. What you're going to notice about here, and this is the important part, is that all of our moderate income homes, the ones that these are rent controlled, these are mixed in. They're inclusionary into the rest of the apartments. There's not a little section for the less endowed financially people. They're all inclusionary, so there's no there's no discrimination. The housing data, unfortunately, some of this was a little bit 2019 and 2020. So what we're looking at is that statewide, there's a slight difference in the building permits. In the building permits for Walton County, there was about 1,700 building permits in 2020. That's COVID year, so we have to give them a pass to a certain extent, but they kept building during COVID. The building permits for the state of Florida were 164,074 building permits, which tells us, which statistically we know, they're continuing to build and we're continuing to have a housing crisis. Even though these are being built, less than 36% of these are for rent, and they're less than that are for people who can afford to only be able to expend about 30% of their income or 40% of their income. And these are my references to that. I do have one or two other things real quick just to kind of bring home my point. This one is very hard to see. I'm going to go ahead and admit to you. This particular handout is single-family homes. It's sales in Walton County. We already know they're pretty high, so on and so forth. The important part, and I'm going to show it to you real quick. I'm sorry I don't have it on a slide. The dark red and blue, those are numbers. Those are the numbers built or purchased or sold by owners and then by investors. The red is investor, blue is an owner. The more important issue is that this is what's considered affordable under the state law, around $250,000, because that's the average in the state of Florida. When you get it, you'll see this sort of hatch color. It's very light, very faint. Those are actually that are sold in Walton County this year and last year, who were bought and sold by investors or even owners, but they exceed that affordable level. And most of the chart is exceeding the affordable level for Walton County. So I'm just going to hand these out just so y'all have it for. Just love that information.
What we're going to call this, Hayward?
First one was Exhibit 1. We'll just make this Exhibit 2.
So in it.
Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I think the housing needs in South Walton has been needed for many years. And I think it's great that something like this is being proposed. What I don't understand is, if you can build 425 units and you're only building 321, why don't y'all maximize the use of the property and build the 425?
Well, so to answer that, to be very completely honest, I think one, our numbers are very accurate to the development site. So it's a matter of looking at it productively, how much you have to do, because with each new unit you have more parking space and then the more you fill out the parking space, you have less stormwater. So we have to be careful how we develop the site.
Protecting the environment.
We're protecting the development as a whole, yes.
Okay.
And I would add to that, to be very clear, there is a, when you do a mixed use development, there is a term you probably remember from years ago that they referred to as double dipping. We have to be careful that we're not using all of this and all of that and creating this monster creation. What we're doing is we're saying this much is for the residential, this much is for the commercial, and it's separated out.
I wanted to point out that there were some opposition letters in our package where they're talking about density and environmental issues like stormwater. It does appear that the way the project is designed, that there is a considerable amount of open space and stormwater on the site to address those issues, where the density does not appear to, when you have a multi-story building, your lot coverage is less than what you would have if you built a bunch of single-family dwellings. So your density, your impervious lot coverage and whatnot is much better with a 4-story structure like this than it would be if you cut it up and sold off a bunch of lots. And then you have that massive park and then the big stormwater pond behind the building to the north. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up, that I'm not entirely sure what the opposition to this would be from the general public if those issues have been addressed.
I think if we go back and just reiterate what our conditions we're required to have. We are, obviously, stormwater is going to be addressed during technical review. We're doing that, and the Public Works has already felt that we've satisfied those concerns and the attenuation that's necessary. We do have a meeting with the department next week, and we'll be looking at some other things and ways to improve our project. So, we're still in the process of making sure we handle those issues. We do have a significant amount of open space and a significant amount of stormwater. And, the reality is there's plantings and bufferings and open area spaces. And if Walton County allowed you to go higher so you could have less of a footprint, we would. They don't. It's, we don't have a way to get a variance from that. And so we are at a 4-story structure that needs to be something that is sustainable, and we believe that we have achieved that goal. We have met our compatibility requirements, looking at the amount of buffer that we have and separating the commercial even further from that residential to ensure that there's less of an impact on the neighborhood behind us or north to the bay. And there's an obvious need. Our housing numbers are drudgingly slow and exceedingly expensive. So, I have more charts and things, but I feel like y'all are probably tired of that. And I have them, I'll submit them to the planning staff and to the clerk and give them out to you for that purpose. This particular next chart from the Schimberg Institute specifically shows how Walton County is exceedingly higher and Okaloosa County has stayed as far as sales of single-family homes with the state of Florida consistently.
Exhibit
3.
You need a break? Trying to understand.
It's an allowable.
If you approve it, it's allowable. Otherwise,
Residential is already an allowable use under the code.
under technical terms, commercial is commercial.
That's why we need to go down.
So let me sum up for you, and then I'll let Stephen get up here. The applicant is here to answer any questions you may have. So is the engineer. But more specifically, we are here requesting that you approve a conditional use to allow us to have a mixed-use development of residential and commercial on this 25 acres for 321 apartments, of which 20% will be from moderate income housing.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna give Stephen the opportunity to hear from Stephen. Come up, Stephen. What is it? We need to take a break. Paul, you feeling better? Is your blood pressure came down?
My blood pressure did.
You need a baby aspirin or
They're
anything?
tied to that, I think. Break, I'm gonna step out of my truck and grab my water.
You gonna go have a smoke? Bobby, what you doing down here tonight? None of your help showed up for work? Oh, yeah, that's that rezoning district stuff that's going on tonight.
I'm gonna speak from you in a minute.
Okay,
Oh.
turn it down, I guess, Stephen.
Jack was trying to get out a vote, and I told him he's got to vote.
I think it's comfortable. We're gonna put you in a seat. That's the goal here.
Got a coat in the truck if he wants one.
Charlie's about to go to sleep. Lost Jeff.
Jeff.
Y'all need to hurry now. Come on. You're gonna have to do this again because my memory is going, so when they get back, you're gonna have to do your presentation again. Make it longer? That's all right. We're good. We're good.
We'll have some more charts for you.
Do what?
We'll have more charts for you.
Yeah, okay. Well, you always come prepared. That's good.
Yeah, have at it.
Are they out there talking, or what are they doing?
I don't know. I didn't see it.
Bobby said they're out there talking. Well, we need to come on. Huh? Yeah. Let's get this show on the road. Paul is still on the road. All right.
Yes,
Go ahead, Stephen.
thank you. If I could have the staff report entered into the record, please.
So entered.
Thank you very much. Based on the application submitted, staff has determined that the proposed conditional use satisfies the requirements of section 2.02.15. Specifically, staff has determined that the layout of the land and the separation of uses, and in particular the commercial uses against the corridor, serves to create the compatibility that would be sought for a development like this. As well, there is, just like the chair said, a recognized need for multifamily and affordable housing, especially in the south portion of the county. And there is, or appears to be, sufficient infrastructure to allow for the development as well.
You want him to clarify your question?
No, I'm good.
You good? Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Anyone else like to speak on this? The owners here, anybody would like to say anything? Sure, come up. State your name for the record.
I'm Steve Young. I'm one of the residents that lives on the bay side,
Bayside.
close to Botanic Gardens.
Okay.
Yeah, off of Walton Way. So, a couple of things here, just because, like when they say it just went through the TRC, maybe you were referencing, I wrote an email to each one of our commissioners because this thing is way away from being through the TRC. Mac Carpenter at the end of the meeting did a summary of the things that it brought up that were the big issues. So the impact onto the residents were, hey, do we need affordable housing in Walton County? Yeah, all right. But what I don't want it to do is cause a major problem for the other residents that are in the area. And here's where we get into the stormwater thing, is part of the deal. Number one, when you talked about that, the golf garden, how that's a beautiful property. Well, the first thing that I noted on the stormwater deal is, see, the golf garden has a big pond, right? and it'll hold a lot of water, way more than their retention pond, okay? Now, when they ran their model, it doesn't look like they took that account. That's like 2 million gallons or so of water that's gonna get dumped into the community. Why is that an issue? We're already flooding where we weren't flooding before, okay? This last couple weeks ago when we had the rain, big time, we had, a lot of flooding. So first thing that Mac said that was, as a contingency, hey, anyways, got to look into this. I don't, they're not accounting for that. We talked a little bit about, there's plenty of room with this retention pond and stuff. Well, there's a huge issue on the retention pond. Us as the residents, what we brought up, we used the geotechnical report and had pictures of like the pond that's right very close to the property, with the Corps of Engineers saying Walton County says the bottom of your pond, if it's a dry pond, has to be 2 feet below, or has to have a 2-foot spacer to the water table. Okay, it's not there. All right, the number is actually in the 10-foot range. The numbers that when we're pulling from the geotechnical report and visibly what we see, what they're using, they can't substantiate it. So even more water is going into the area. Do they care about the environment? When they put their plan together, they missed, the oil trap, right? They agreed at the TRC to put one in, but they missed it, okay? I'm struggling with trusting these folks, all right? Now, there's a DOT ditch on the side of the property. During the TRC, it's a safety issue. That's a lot of water there. It's a real hazard. They're like, yeah, maybe we'll put up a hedge or something so that we don't have people going in. They need a fence. Now, I know that's not part of what you're doing, but, my thing is, I agreed with I love your comment on if rent is going to be affordable, why put a 20-year limit on it? Man, I totally get that. But the impact of this thing with the storm water as to what it's dumping into an already oversaturated Miramar Beach is a massive problem. Maybe you're not the right ones. We'll get in front of the BCC to do it, and why I wrote the commissioners, with this stuff. But that needs to be addressed, and we don't need to put a development like this that has a 25-acre property where you cover 17 of those acres, 2/3 of it, with pavement, that's so that you can't soak in and you're just gonna dump a whole lot of extra water. Can you meet this? Could they do the design different, right? To have like a parking garage and stuff? Yeah, but anyways, that's a design thing. I'm not here to tell them how to design anything. So if we're gonna do it, I'd like to see it done right and done well and to county code. And that's, so my pushback on this development.
You don't mind the project going in?
I don't mind if it's going to meet the county codes, which it is nowhere close to.
Why do you think it does not?
Okay, it starts off the first one with the water, the first stormwater issue. A pre-development, post-development, the amount of runoff cannot increase post-development. That's why I bring up the Gulf Garden has a big pond. It has a big retention pond, right? When you fill that in, you've got to account for that somewhere, right? That's just going to dump, when it rains, a whole bunch more water on it. So that's, so it doesn't meet that. It doesn't meet the retention pond capabilities. Those are the two things that are outstanding that need to get through the TRC. And those are the two biggest issues, or the non-compliant issues that we have.
So what you're saying is there's a large pond on the site now, they're gonna fill in, and you think when they fill it in, then it won't meet the stormwater, will not have the.
Yeah, their plan shows the only thing that they're doing to capture that is to put in the retention pond to capture the first inch of rain, right? And what we're saying is it won't even capture the first inch of rain because they're so far off on the water table. Two different issues.
You say we're saying, who are we saying?
I'm sorry.
Do you have a engineer? Do you have?
What I have is I have a bunch of documentation that the residents put together to show. Now, first thing on filling in the pond, are they filling, is there a big pond? Yes, there is a big pond there. Are they filling it in? And is there where, yeah, they're filling it in. There's not a place, it's not, so that's an extra 2 million
Are
gallons.
you concerned about the pond being filled in, and you're saying that their retention pond is not large enough?
Correct.
You're saying the TRC, I don't think that's my concern here tonight.
I don't know if it is.
Yeah, I know, I'm trying to get, we're gonna try to get answers to this.
So, yeah,
And that's your three concerns.
those are yes, sir.
Then you don't mind if we let Mr. Carpenter address those?
I don't. Mac is and will, address those. So that is the thing, and I saw this on the list, and I'm just a resident.
Hey, we're glad you're here.
So
We're
I
glad to
thought
hear
I'd
from you.
sit here, and
We're
I'm
trying
learning
to
how
answer
government
to
works.
Make sure you're happy with us. Thank you. Mr. Carpenter?
Mac, were you sworn in earlier?
Yes, I was. Mac Carpenter for the Planning Department, Carpenter. With regard to the previous speaker's comments, stormwater was addressed at TRC. They presented a stormwater plan signed and sealed by a professional engineer. Our professional engineer reviewed it and agreed with it. It still has to go to the Water Management District for a permit. And at the TRC, essentially, the neighbors agreed that if we have a PE designing the plan, we have a PE reviewing the plan, and it has to get a permit from the state before it can be built, and that permit is issued, everyone was in agreement that it would meet the requirements of the code.
Northwest Florida Water Management is oversight of the PE, correct? To make sure that it meets what is required.
Yes, and a condition of approval will be that they have to have that permit before they can commence construction.
What about the pond being filled in?
They are proposing to fill in the pond. These are man-made ponds. They've been determined to be man-made ponds. The Water Management District concurs with that, and DEP has concurred with that.
They're gonna fill them in?
So they are,
Fill them in with a sandy material that will absorb water?
to a certain extent, yes. But just for clarification, the stormwater aspect of this development is not before this board tonight. What is before this board is the conditional use approval, which is only one component.
We understand that, but we'd like to give the citizens our opportunity to speak so that we have all the information to make sure that we make the decision that is best for all of South Walton and North Walton.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate that, and that is exactly what we did at TRC also.
That's right. This is our process. Thank you. Come out and state your name for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Donna Johns. I live in the neighborhood just northeast of this, just by a few feet, and I've been in that home for 20 years. And Miramar Beach is 7 miles. It's all Miramar Beach is 7 miles. We have got so much development going on right now. I can sit in my backyard and throw stones literally in every direction for new developments that are going on. 2 4-story condos going on across the street at Seascape, along with a hotel in front of the Blake right down the street, a neighborhood just to the east of this one and south of me, a neighborhood on Walton Way, 2 neighborhoods on Walton Way. All of those in Miramar Beach, and a parking lot that the TDC is putting in on Highway 98. We are building every single square inch of Miramar Beach. Is paving a parking lot. It is absolutely sickening, heartbreaking. And the county was going to buy the golf garden because it was our only large piece of parcel left in the county or in Miramar Beach. And they flipped on us at the last minute and decided not to because there were people that didn't want the competition. I don't understand that because we weren't going to leave it as a golf garden. We just wanted green space. That's all we wanted. This affordable housing stuff, first of all, the county is putting a road through the golf garden, And the reason they're putting a road through there is because DOT would not have put a light there for the people on the south end without it coming through our neighborhoods. And so we are stuck with a road with another light. We have 3 ways with 3 lights to get in and out of our whole community. Emerald Bay doesn't have one, not one. We have 3. And we don't even want that light. We don't want that road. We're stuck with it because the developers wanted it, because the developers are building million-dollar homes across the street on Driftwood and Ellis, and they want to use that property. They want those people to be able to have a light to get in and out. So they are going to, excuse my language, they're going to screw our neighborhood by putting that light in there. And now our forest shore that runs parallel basically to Highway 98 is a way that when people don't want to go on Highway 98 and they put it in their GPS or whatever, the Waze will take them right down Forest Shore, and Forest Shore is turning into a big highway itself. We have safety issues. We have traffic issues galore. We have stormwater. I have never, ever seen stormwater like this before. I have seen my neighbors at the end of my street, water bubbling straight up from their yard. I've never seen it before. I've got water on both ends of me. I've got tons of video and tons of pictures to prove this to anyone that would like to see it. The originally with this road that the county is going to put in, this property, this development here was supposed to have commercial that ran along that road. They've already gotten a variance to change that so they could put the commercial along Highway 98. So that's one that they've already done. That back 10 acres was bought by the county so that we could use it for something. We haven't even determined what for yet because they've leased it back to the golf garden for their use for the past 2 years. So we haven't had a park. We haven't had that. So a couple of things that I'd like to mention is that the cap on the amount of money that somebody can make to be considered affordable housing has gone up to $85,000, not $65,000. And there are other apartments in South Walton. There are new ones over there by 393 by Sefco. Some very nice new apartments over there. I have no idea what the cost is. There are also apartments behind John John's, which Tom McNeil, I believe, from Sandestin built for his workers to be able to live there. So what this is doing is you've got, I do not live in $1 million house. My neighborhood is a modest neighborhood. My neighborhood, you can find a house in there for $400,000 today. So, and it's right here next to this. There are houses on the bay that are $1 million homes, and then the developers on the south side of 98 built $1 million homes there. So with that and all the other construction that's going on there, we are really just going to be, we're going to be locked in like sardines. We can't get out now. You know, if there's going to be a fire, if there's going to be a hurricane, you know, I don't really know what we're going to do. It's just unbelievable that all of this building is going on. And I think it's unfair that they want another, I don't care if you want to call it a conditional use or what, but it's a variance. You know, they want to change something to fit their need. And if the rules say that you're supposed to put the apartments on top of the commercial, then do it. And I'm hoping that they're not asking for another variance in height, because looking at the staff report, that's what it appeared to be. And I hope that's not the case, because the rules are 50 feet and that's it. And so I'm just hoping, actually I'd hope that they don't allow any changes, that if they're going to build that, which I don't want, a lot of other people don't want, but if they're going to do it, make them stick to the regular rules, please. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else?
Good evening, Ed Stanford with Core Engineering and Consulting. I'm the engineer for the project. Just want to give you a brief history of this project. Very few times in my career have I been able to work on a project that I feel actually achieves a lot of the goals that the county wants to. One of them is housing. I understand there's development going all over Walton County. It's the way it is right now. Florida's a very hot spot to go in general, not just Walton County, but Florida. This is a culmination of 3 years. We started on this, we had 80 townhomes on that 10 acres, and we were going to develop 80 townhomes on that 10 acres. We started working on that plan with an additional 260 or whatever, no, 294 units that were south of the wetlands.
Get to the mic, please.
And so through the process, we were going to develop, or there was a plan to develop commercial and multifamily along that right-of-way, along the new road. And through the process of the land use change and working with the county to develop a new road and a signal. So the DOT and the county agreed to the signal. The roadway was something that the county has wanted for many, many years. This is not something that is 3 years old, but more like 15 years old. And we're working with the county to develop and share costs in that new roadway. But as part of that, you know, it's the shifting of the multifamily from the back to the front and making a very compact footprint. And with great amenities, there's 2 acres inside the buildings themselves, are about 1.8 something acres for pools, gazebos, green space, et cetera, gymnasium inside the building. So I think it's going to be an attractive development that addresses the county's need for a signalized roadway that will actually address other issues, and I don't know if that's not going to be talked about here, but is more access management issues on 98 itself, and the south side to the north side access issues. There were some inconsistencies with what Mr. Young said. There is a 1.45 acre pond that we are filling in, and we have a 3.39 acre pond that we're actually developing, so as part of this. So that's all technical review. Those are things that are handled outside of this purview, and the 3 things we are looking at. A conditional use is not a variance. We have not gotten any other variances on this property. That was mentioned by Ms. Johns earlier. And I've met with these folks many, many times, maybe not these 2 individually, but the residents as we have moved through this process. And even when the property was available for the county to purchase, I met with them many, many times. It has always been slated for a multifamily development. There's been no secret about that. And I feel like at the end of the day, this development meets many, many other criteria, including safety and redundant utilities that are going to be provided. We're working with South Walton Utilities right now to provide an additional water line to the north. So. And
you're filling in a 1.7 acre and creating a 3-point-something acre.
1.45 acre pond.
You're filling in.
3.39 acre pond.
You're creating.
Yes.
For stormwater.
Yes.
Which is engineered and approved.
Absolutely. And they have sent emails to Mac and to staff. And I have been out there. I've gone out on site myself, taking pictures of water level in the pond, which is the greatest indicator of where water levels are, because these ponds are, well, they're man-made, but they're dug into natural dirt. So there's no liner, and the elevation is the elevation of the water.
We understand, I think we have a pretty good, clear understanding of what's going on here tonight. We do appreciate the neighbors in the neighborhood talking. We appreciate you being here, but we also think that you know, the land is the owners that meets the code, that you should be able to do something with the property within the code, and we feel like that is something for us to discuss, but I think the issues has been discussed pretty well. Do you have something to
I
add?
had one quick question. Did you transfer density from the park to the front of the parcel?
No.
Melissa, do you have anything else to add before we close this?
No.
No. Robert just wanted to answer.
Anyone else has anything to say? The board members has any discussion? Do anyone, close it public discussion?
1 second, but Earlier, Mr. Huggins and I had stepped out. He'd had a question about whether or not he should participate. Based on what he advised, I gave him my opinion that there would be no conflict of interest and he can't participate and vote.
He can or
He
can't?
can. So,
I guess we allow it. Motion to close the public discussion.
Motion to close.
Second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion, conditional use on Botanic Miramar Beach conditional use.
I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use.
Second.
Discussion? I think it's been discussed.
Right,
And-
I think the public comments probably are a little bit outside of the scope of what we're doing here. And I think overwhelmingly, people support what this project is bringing. I think they gave up some of their density by having a park there, and there's really no downside to separating the commercial and residential use on the parcel. Mixing them together is
Not on for a purpose.
I think they've met the stormwater requirements, it sounds like. And overall, the separation makes sense because it's compatible with the way everything, and you want to see these developments kind of fit into the fabric of the community. And so by keeping the commercial along 98, I think that's the right thing to do. Definitely don't want your residential stacked on top of the commercial up against 98. That's not a very desirable condition. And then you're separating all the development away from a lot of the neighborhood that's on the north side. And I do admit that they have some drainage issues back there, but that portion of the golf course that's not being developed is going to buffer that where the wetlands separate. So
All of South Walton have issues with raining.
I've also had 80 inches of rain.
But
another
not-
4.5 last night.
And I like the fact that they do consider a workforce in South Walton housing need. Any further discussion? We have a motion, a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? You got your conditional use. Moving right along. Next item on the agenda, I believe, will be the Terry Cox property. Who's here on behalf of the Terry Cox? I'm sorry, ma'am, your time's up.
After I've waited this long? Good evening, y'all. My name's Terry Lynn
Conditional
Cox,
use RV, okay, good deal, go ahead.
and I have a couple lots in the Oakwood Hills subdivision in Mossy Head, Florida. And I was not aware that I could not put a travel trailer on the property. I was going to build a house, but I had some medical issues come up, and I've already invested in the water tap, which was $3,200, and the septic tank was $4,500. And the only reason I knew that I couldn't put the travel trailer there for long-term, once I found out what was going on, was I was requesting a power pole. And when I requested the power pole, they told me that that a long-term travel trailer was not permitted on a parcel less than 5 acres.
Ms. Cox, you're out in Oakwood Lakes Unit 3?
Pardon me?
Where do you live? In Unit, what road do you live on?
I currently live on 41 Lolly Road.
In Unit 3. In Unit 3, we have allowed a lot of RVs on lots out in that area.
Yes, sir.
It is something the county has imposed, you know, kind of protect the value and make sure that, like on Williams Road, and be honest with you, I was against the RV. I guess sometimes I still am, except when I drive by a place, there's about 10, and it's pretty not
So
where it
pretty,
should be. So
yes.
we're just trying to take and regulate it, but you understand, we're gonna hear this conditional use tonight. We will not allow you to stay in it permanently, just for the record. But you can be allowed, you can move it off one day and move it back. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Who's gonna police that? I don't think Bobby with Walton County Sheriff's Department gonna go out there and see if you do that, but just as long as we have an understanding, right?
Yes, sir.
So we're gonna try to help you out here, okay? Have a seat up front.
Thank you, sir.
Ma'am, Ms. Cox, up front. Yeah. We gotta get through with you before you go back. Stephen, what do you think?
If I could have the staff report.
So
entered.
entered.
Thank you. Based on the application and the minimum requirements of section 2.02.04, the conditional use application appears to satisfy the code.
And the main thing that she can't say there on a permanent basis is, number one, the health department will not allow it on the, and number two, it's not tied down to meet the code as the mobile homes for the area, right?
Yeah, there's three requirements. One is absolutely taking care of your solid and liquid waste, not a commercial use, and you can't stay there permanently. And her application appears to satisfy all of those.
Very good. Any questions? Thank you, Stephen.
Yep.
Anyone here has anything to say? Ms. Cox, you want to add anything? Nope, that's good. Thank you, ma'am. Motion to close the public discussion?
Motion to close.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
You got your request. You're welcome. Thank you for coming. Next item on the agenda, McNeil Carroll Engineering, authorized agent on behalf of John Freer, property owner. Just another strawberry.
No, sir. And allow me to please correct the staff report for the record. That address is incorrect. The correct address is 13699 US Highway 98 East.
We're not even going, what is it?
13699 US Highway 98 East. It was advertised correctly. The staff
Okay,
report was just not.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
I want to skip that so we can move along.
Yes, sir.
Come up and present your case.
Good evening, Robert Carroll, McNeil Carroll Engineering, 17800 Panama City Beach Parkway. I have been sworn in. I've got one exhibit that I thought you had, you do not. Can I pass these out for y'all?
We have a lot of stuff on our desk. We're hoping this is all positive.
Well, hopefully this will clarify some of the issues that we want to discuss and to prove our hardship.
Okay.
I'm here as the engineer of record. Mr. Freer is here, the applicant, also the architect, Charlie Clary, so if we have any technical issues or questions. The project is located in Inlet Beach. It is located at the northeast intersection of North Walton Lakeshore Drive and Highway 98. They were purchased, there's two separate parcels here, 2014, 2015. There's a previous development that was done on the far west corner, known as Shops at Inlet. And in your packet, you've got a site plan that depicts what we're proposing, but also on that left side, that's an existing facility that was developed by the applicant.
We got to do this applicant exhibit 1, so entered.
So our main hardship is due to the topography of the land. Starting at the intersection on the west side, US Highway 98 is all about an elevation 16 or so, but as you go up North Walton Lakeshore Drive, you quickly go from about a 16 up to about an elevation 29. So you've got at least 13 feet of elevation change that occurs on that far west side. The shops, which was built at the intersection, the finished floor on that, we've got about an elevation 2392, almost 24, and it varies to a 2192. Keep going to the east, you've got the middle parcel that
Hang
shows.
on just a second.
Sorry.
Let's get on the record exactly what you're asking for. You asking for approval of variance,
A height variance.
height variance from 40 feet to 50 feet.
Yes, sir.
That's what you're asking.
Yes, sir.
And you asking for it because of the elevation change. Is that-
We had the elevation change. VMU outside of neighborhood is allowed to be 50 feet. There are other developments in the area that are 50 feet, but the neighborhood plan that was adopted in 2018 limited the height of the VMUs along 98 to 40 feet. So we're asking to deviate from that to allow us to go to 50 feet. as the topography of the land keeps going down, so as you keep going to the east, all the way to the far east, the adjacent property, they're down sitting at elevation 1258 with their building. So you've got basically the parcel of the land does this. We've already developed up here, and we want to develop here, but the developments need to work together, so we're already fighting height. To the north of us, those parcels up there, elevation 24, 26, so they're about 10 feet above us. The Inlet Beach Neighborhood Plan that was adopted also requires that parking is to the side and the rear, which means the building has to come to the front, which means we're having to develop in the bottom of the bowl. And the way that the height is measured is based on average grade of where that structure is. So we're basically going to be taking between 16 to 17 as the average grade, and we have to go up from there at 40 feet. If we were to develop anywhere outside the part, like on the north part, or if we started all over and develop on the west side, the 40 feet would be fine because we would be at a higher grade. But we're already having to raise this side up, which is taking away from the ability to do the project. So
You raising it up, you already raised it up, the elevation? Have you all filled dirt in? You said you can't do that?
no, sir. We're at the bottom of the hill. So the adjacent properties, like going to the west, there's another large vacant tract, but they're like 10 feet higher than we are. So they're 40 feet. Even if we were granted the 50 feet, they're still going to be taller than we are in relation to sea level. They own from North Walton Lakeshore Drive all the way to the right that you see that's in red. And what's in red is where we're proposing to develop. The site plan that's in your packet shows, so we're trying to develop on that far east side. And that's where all the grades are dropping.
You don't want to put any fill dirt in?
Well, we're going to have to bring in fill because we have the shops at Inlet, which is already developed, and because you want them to work together, we already have, it's a single access that works with both. So by raising that, but the way that the county measures the height criteria is from what your average grade is. So if we filled it first and then we did our building height, that'd be great, but it's based on what the existing grade is.
Are you saying that the average grade is for both parcels or just the single parcel?
The parcels to just what's in red. That's what we're trying to develop now. And as you can see, there's a retention pond there, which is about a 16, and it drops all the way down to a 14 on that far eastern boundary.
I see it going from 14 to 20, 22, 23.
Yes. See, on the far west side, where the shops at Inlet is currently built, that building sits up at almost 24.
But you have a 9-foot difference in elevation.
Yes.
So you're losing 4.5 feet on your average grade.
Yes. And the parcels to the north of us, as you can see, they're up at 24, 26. They're almost 10 feet above us to begin with.
Single-family houses.
Yes, sir. Which they're allowed to be 50 feet.
Is that Grand Point?
Part of that is, yes, sir. There's 2 subdivisions up there, but I think that portion is part of Grand Point. It's where it transitions. You got the skinnier lots, and then the wider is the different development. Inlet height have been corrected.
I'm still having trouble understanding why you can't fill it.
Well, we can fill it, but the height of the structure, when we make an application, the department is basing the total height of the structure from average grade, what it is now.
Not after you fill it.
Correct.
Before you fill it.
If we could, and you can't bring in fill dirt without a development order.
Okay, now if we grant you a 50-foot height, does that mean your building gonna be another 10 foot? Or does that mean you're bringing in fill dirt to get the extra?
Well, we're bringing in fill, but it's measured from that existing grade. Our structure will be 50, but it's still based off of what that existing grade is. If it were based off of what fill dirt grade is, that'd be great.
So the way the 2 projects are coming together, according to the survey, it looks pretty flat right there. There's a 20-foot contour that's kind of straddling the property line.
This was the grade prior to the shops being built.
Okay, so what is the current finished grade of that parking that's on that east boundary?
You know, the west side where the shops was built?
The east side of the shops parcel.
That's still the way this is. That's not been developed yet. So these are our current grades.
This side right here is where the parking is.
Yes, it ties into that driveway that comes out.
Elevation of this parking here.
So the shops building is about 2192, so it's probably in the 21 range.
So it's pretty much at existing grade.
Pretty close, about 5 feet higher than what's to the right and what the retention pond, so.
I mean, the contour line on the survey says it's 20 feet, I mean, parking's at 21.
Rough, I didn't bring in the grading plan for the shops, that's already been built. This was the survey prior to, I was just trying to give you a lay of the land of what it was. I should have brought in some as-built.
It sounds like the parking's at pretty much at existing grade.
Yes.
So the two parcels coming together, you're talking about that there's this big discrepancy between the two parcels.
Right.
Well,
but it's pretty flat right through
But
there.
look, all the way to the east, see that piece? You've got the parking, which is at around 20, but
talking
to the
about
right,
this
it
hole right
drops
here.
off. Yeah, that's a 16 in there. And that's where, because the building's gonna be placed up front where the retention pond is and where that,
Well, part of the problem is that the parcel to the east of that is down at 14.
that building's actually at 1250. It just goes to the
Yeah, it keeps
bottom
going
of the hill.
down.
Yes, sir.
So the whole point of the regulation is that you have, consistent stair stepping of the height along the line. So if you've got a variance to fill that in and carry your 20-foot contour all the way across, would wind up being a 5 or 6 foot variance in height.
Yes.
Now your structure is gonna be significantly higher than what they would be. Because eventually they're gonna wanna tear that down and build something else too.
You're at the bottom of the bowl, yes.
So,
But going further to the west, as they're at 40, their 40s are, again, would even be higher than where we would be, even if we were allowed to go to the 50.
so all of the commercial along that section of Inlet Beach is restricted to 40 feet?
Yes.
Each,
But the point, which was at the other end, right at Rosemary, it's at 50 feet.
they have to get a variance for that?
No, because it was developed before this was adopted. This got adopted in 2018. And our client purchased these properties back in 2014 and 2015. They've owned this prior to that adoption of that 50-foot going to 40.
That was in 2018.
Yes, sir. September, I believe it was.
Go ahead.
So basically, with the adoption of the 50-foot height, or excuse me, 40-foot height restriction, outside of neighborhood inlet, we could be at 50 feet. The neighbors to the north, if they chose, they could be at 50 feet. But because we're in the bottom of this bowl, we're basically requesting to allow us to come up so these two developments can tie together and take advantage of those grades. It's a 4-story structure. We're not trying to go to 5 stories. That can be in the minutes. I mean, I just stated it, but no one is trying to do 5 stories. We've seen a few of the letters of objection, and they don't want us going to 5 stories. That's never been the case.
Have you seen the letters?
I saw them tonight. If we mind part of the design team, if we allow the architect to speak?
Pardon me?
Would you mind if the architect spoke?
Sure, go ahead.
I'm Charlie Clary, and I'm with DAG Architects, 44 Tranquility Lane, Destin, Florida. And as Robert said, we're not asking for any additional density, any additional floors. We're looking for additional height, really to enhance the design as part of this project. At the existing 40 feet with a mixed use, we're probably looking at that existing condition, probably a 12, 13-foot height for the commercial and a 9-foot floor-to-floor height for residential. But after you subtract the floor thickness or the roof thickness from that, we're going to end up with residential units of about an 8-foot ceiling height. And so we, when you look at this whole neighborhood, there around Inlet Beach and the commercial as well as the residential, it is a well-done, high-end community. It does have a certain level of expectation by the residents there in terms of type of design. I think the height of the units, we're not, as I said, we're not asking for any more units, we're not dealing with issues with stormwater problems or anything of that nature. It's more of a design hardship, is probably the best way to put it.
Chairman, may I ask a question?
Sure.
In your initial approach and concept with this, what are you determining to be your average grade elevation for the site?
That would be a Robert.
Okay?
Existing condition?
Of the existing conditions, what is your, what do you calculate to be your average grade?
So the structure's up in that corner, it's gonna be somewhere between 16 to 17. That's pretty much where it's at, but the road's at 16, so we've already gotta come above that. We gotta come up because of drainage, so from the grade level, we've already starting to raise this thing before, just because of design elements, that we've got to have this thing up. So we're losing height because of constraints.
Well, I understand that how the county calculates your average grade, your high, your low, across the site at present conditions. So your average grade at present is 16 to 17 feet. And so that would mean you're requesting to go to 66 to 67 in terms of elevation. And is there any way you can demonstrate what the roof elevation is of your neighbor to the west? And I know you said it.
Talking about our property?
Well,
or further to the west?
No, between what's in red on your site and Lakeshore Drive. Is that still vacant? I'm sorry.
This here. This is an existing building. It's a commercial building owned by the applicant.
Okay. Do you know what your roof height elevation is there?
I think there's a 3D model of that in our packet.
Okay.
That shows, it's a one-story.
It's a single-story commercial building.
Commercial
but it's built up higher.
See, what I'm getting at is, if we consider this, we want to potentially put a parameter that your roof is not higher than theirs.
Well, it's a single-story structure.
Okay.
The commercial is only single-story.
Yeah.
All right, I didn't realize that.
They didn't maximize their building envelope there.
Yeah, had we started all over, the multi-story would have been on that side because that's the higher point versus not at the lower point, we would have flopped the commercial.
Okay.
I've got a question for Charlie. You mentioned that the ceiling heights of the residential units would be about 8 feet if you conform to the 40-foot height limit?
I think it's, after we take out for the commercial side, yes.
So I think that you're losing about 4 feet of overall height due to the average grade reduction.
Right.
In lieu of a 10-foot variance, could you add a foot of ceiling height to each of those floors if you were given a 4-foot variance?
Yes,
So assuming that the site was perfectly flat, you would be required to conform to a 40-foot height limit. There would be no hardship. So you're really only losing, with the slope of the site, 4 feet at the most in overall height. So it's a little bit of a reach to be going for the full 50, but I think that an argument could be made that 3 or 4 feet would be appropriate and not completely out of character and contact with the rest of the community. So I don't know if you considered that.
Yes, sir. Definitely that would help in the overall design for the ceiling heights, particularly in the residential.
So what you doing, reducing it to requesting for a 4-foot?
4 foot, if you will.
Well, I'm noodling on that being, if the site were flat, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. So it's 4 feet that he's losing,
10 to a 4, right?
using the average grade. So instead of giving him a 10-foot variance, which is significant,
Right, you give it
4 foot would be more appropriate.
And they agree to that. Very
Yes,
good.
sir.
Charlie, the tower features, they're showing going up above. Is that correct? They're higher, they're taller in elevation?
I think there is some allowance in the code for potential tower features.
That's
or
the emergency stair and the elevator
Right,
overrun features.
right. Mhm.
So there's no benefit to the
project. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Stephen?
Yes, thank you. If I could have the staff report entered, please. In addition, I would like to enter the dozen or so pieces of correspondence staff has received.
You're talking about the ones that, was on our desk? That's the,
Yes, I believe Karen spread them out for you all. Most of them are labeled number 8 shops East Variance.
do you have the ones that is, just for the record, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, we have 12, 13, and they all are against the variance, is that?
I believe they are in opposition, yes.
Well, 13, how are we gonna label this? This
Deposit, we'll just make it
so entered. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Based on the application submitted, staff has determined that the application is insufficient to meet the minimum variance requirements of the code. The application does not meet the minimum requirements for variance as it relates to the code. You know, the inlet beach plan, it may have been adopted in 18, but you know, this wasn't just a mechanism that the county instituted over the area. You know, there was many homeowners involved, property owners involved that, you know, went to great lengths to work on this plan and get it implemented. So, you know, it's not just a Walton County government action here. You know, there was more involved than that, sir.
Thank you. But
Just-
explain to me something.
Yes, sir. I'll try.
Difference in the elevation that goes from 20 to 14. What are they supposed to do? Go from the 14?
Well, they have to average between the 14 and the 21.
Okay, the average between the 14 and the 21 is what?
17.
And it's 17. So y'all good with the 17 and a half, but you don't want to give them, they only need 20.
Well, they would be going from the 17 to the 20.
Right.
As their base elevation. And the point that I was making is that if somebody had filled that hole
Right.
to 20 feet prior to 2018, they would have 20 feet to work with.
Right.
And so it's kind of a technicality here, and I understand that there's a lot of public opposition to it, but it's not out of character with the fabric of the intent of the rule.
My question is, does the public opposition understand exactly what is here before us? So when you say 40, 50, when I first saw that, I said, here they want to take a 40-foot height, they want to build 10 more feet. I didn't understand the elevation in South Walden that it's counted from the lowest elevation. And then does the majority of the ones in opposition understand that?
I can't speak to their understanding of the codes.
Give them the chance to speak.
Yeah. Again, though, just so it's clear, Mr. Schick is right, the elevation, the grade is taken from the average across the site. So it wouldn't be taken from the lowest, it would be the 17 and change.
But there was also, the road elevation is 16, I believe. And you
Believe so.
have to be above the road. How much do you have to be above the road?
I believe it would be a foot. Yep.
17. Okay. And they want 20.
Well, they've got the parking lot immediately to the west is at 20. So as you're coming across the site, you want those parking levels to match up as they connect them together without excavating down into the site and creating ramp position there.
Okay.
But I think you could phrase it like we strenuously object to the 50-foot height limit in support of all the opposition from the public, but that the site, if it were at 20 feet, we would support a a 40-foot height from the 20-foot contour.
Kind of what I was getting at when I questioned about.
Well, I think I'd like to hear from Mac Carpenter, so we'll let Stephen go.
Okay.
Question?
Well, it seemed like that there was something that you wanted to weigh in on this issue, but what is your position relative to a variance in granting?
We've got a large number of people opposing this. The Inlet Beach Neighborhood Plan was a tremendously painful adoption at the end of the last century. There were many of us that have worked for the county for a long time that did not believe that it could ever be amended. However, the process once moved to the Land Development Code, and the support from the community to amend the plan allowed the plan to be amended. It was a fairly lengthy process. I think the first workshop was actually held at Mr. Freer's restaurant across the street. I mean, measure height every day based on average pre-development grade under the footprint of the buildings. That's where we measure the 50-foot height limit everywhere else. That's where we measure the 32-foot height limit in Point Washington. We measure the 40-foot height limit in Grayton Beach. Could be some hardship with this particular site if it is lower than the adjacent development, and this is designed to be sort of a seamless commercial development from the western edge next to the next street to the west back to the east. I think a 10-foot variance would probably cause a neighborhood to burn the planning department down. Something less than that might be more acceptable. But then going from 40 to 50, I think that's just a tremendous overreach.
I think that we very well understood, they agreed that that we could do less than 50. I think that it's understood that it needs to be 17. I think 17 gets to the foot above the highway. They're at 20, so we're looking at about 3. So we did a 3. I think that that's something that the neighborhood should be able to hopefully accept, that it would be a uniform development that would look better in the community than if we don't do it.
I certainly think a case could be made for that very position.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Not right now, don't leave. We have people from the audience who would like to speak. Anyone like to speak? State your name for the record.
My name is Giancarlo Larea. I'm a resident in Inlet Beach. I'm also part of the Inlet Beach Neighborhood Association. I'm a frequent patron of the Freer's establishment, so I know them very well. I think that for clarification purposes, the opposition of the community isn't necessarily the project. The opposition of the community is because we don't want to establish a precedent on a variance. Because if we do it for them, which I think that they probably would do a magnificent project, then the next guy down at the terrace or the next guy down further down the grade is going to want another exception. And then we go from 40 to 50 to 60 to 70, and then when do we stop? We already have the point in Rosemary. It's 5 stories. You can see it from the road. You can see on the Panama City Beach side, you have a condo that's 10 stories high. So what does it point? So that's our concern, really, sir.
So let's have an understanding.
Yes, sir.
They came in asking from the 40 to 50, not to increase the building. Do you understand? I mean, I didn't understand it until it was explained to me. Do you understand the topo that, have you seen the topo?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Do you understand the topo is averaging up to 17 feet? Do you understand their parking lot there now is at 20?
I do.
All they want to do is match that by 3 feet.
I do.
Would that not be a good thing to happen?
That actually, the proposal Mr. Chip said is what we would actually agree to.
But then that's what we're looking at. Look, we agree with, we agree. I don't know if I agree, but I understand that y'all don't want any big heights down there, and then that's fine. That's not what they're asking for. They're asking to use their land that they have to be, that will look good driving down and accessibility.
I have no doubts about it.
Especially for the handicap. If you got a parking here and they won't go there, and you got a 3-foot ramp that you got to push them out, we got to take all that in consideration. So we understand that.
Right.
So you understand that they understand, I think we understand pretty
Right,
good.
and the compromise is something that we will look into and accept.
Thank you. What about you, sir? State your name. for the-
I'm also a resident in the Heights. I'm actually juxtaposed to the vacant lot right behind there. I've actually looked at this and in support because of the fact of, I look at it as the development opportunities, but I look at it more of a safety issue for, I'm broadside of the wind during a hurricane. And this develops a buffer for me, and it's also noise abatement. So there's some benefits to that.
You for it?
I am totally for it, and I think later on in another development program, we'll get to a point to where we can talk about stoplights and things in that area that I think will come from this. I think that this variance of height is, regardless of what heights, I can see the Gulf. I knew when I bought that house that eventually I would lose that opportunity. His last development, I lost a portion, and I knew that I would continue to lose some. It is what it is. But the development to me is more important because that's nothing more than vacant land. It's worthless until we develop something. And then again, like I said, we'll start looking at hopefully doing a stoplight out there for the safety because the traffic right now is crazy. And hopefully with the influx of people and that residential portion and the commercial development, we can do something, control that traffic.
We appreciate you coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? You get the last word. Come up. Do you understand where we're going with this?
Absolutely.
You understand the 17 to 20, you can probably get a 3. Can you live with a 3?
Auction? No. We would love the 4, but if the 3 is what's offered, we're anything is above what we have right now, so we'll take anything that you're willing to propose.
You know, look.
Yes, sir.
Let me tell you something. I'm very critical of the planning department. They know that. But they come here tonight, we got 13 opposition. They put a compromise on the table. I appreciate them doing that.
Absolutely.
And I'm not gonna force them to get 4 if they can live with 3. So I think you better be happy you're getting 3.
We're extremely thrilled. Yes, sir.
I can't tell you, but I think the planning department will work with us. If we do go that route.
Well, we thank you for consideration.
Motion to close the public discussion.
Motion to close.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion.
I'll make a motion to deny the 50-foot height limit in favor of a 43-foot height
We
limit.
can't do that.
What?
Just make the motion for what you want to approve.
Approve?
If
Okay.
you want to approve something, yes.
There's some semantics in there that I think are very important to this argument. But I'll make a motion to approve a 43-foot height limit for this parcel to offset the hole that sits on the east portion of the lot.
Make sure your final order says hold. Second.
Second.
Discussion.
I think it's a good compromise. I do think there is a bit of a hardship on the terrain of the vacant parcel.
I think there's tremendous hardship. Motion second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? We appreciate it. Is that the last?
That was it. Motion to approve the minutes, Daryl.
What is this last one on here?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
One last thing on the agenda?
It got removed. Us to remove it.
That was the one.
Motion to approve the minutes?
We did that. We got a second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
On the minute.
Got it.
Motion, who did the motion to approve the minutes?
Me.
Second.
I did.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All right, you want to discuss that issue you want to discuss?
Well, and
How you doing? Hey, man, talk about, I think,
Do what?
occupational
Hang on a
license.
minute. We haven't adjourned yet. Do you want, we haven't adjourned.
Talk about occupational license before they adjourn. All right.
Go ahead.
Well, I basically stated my thoughts behind it and the premise that with the proper ordinance, it could give us a measure of state this correctly, not reprimanding, but enforcing some of these or holding the folks accountable.
It's kind of like having a contract. Take and make sure that, who's going to file it? Like our survey that we used to have, we don't have to file as local. Who files the complaint?
In that case, now, while a private citizen can file a complaint against a surveyor, an architect, an engineer, it seems to carry a lot more weight with the board if you cite specific violations, if a complaint comes from another peer.
But we've had
Field.
city employees file a complaint on behalf of the board with him not coming here and defending or, stand up for these property owners coming here in tears, so they got an issue because of him. And it never
Even
was
like-
done, so if you implement another fee process where, there's more record for it, I don't see where it will serve the purpose.
And it was just a thought. I mean, I don't know all the workings behind an occupational license. I know that a lot of municipalities.
I think in a perfect world, it would work perfect. But I think we have too many regulations now that people have to jump through, and I'm just fear more regulations and more fees.
Well, I was just trying to think of some way to now, Mr. Hall seemed to think it was a good idea.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not a bad idea.
Are you eavesdropping? Okay. I mean, are you,
The one before, that's right.
okay. All right. Now, okay.
And I think some of the things you see that come before this board are just, you're trying to make a bad situation better as best you can, and there's only so much you can do. Some of these things, like you pointed out, Mr. Johnson, are just gonna probably have to be resolved in a court of law, and that's probably where you're gonna get the most, is when you start hitting them in the pocketbook. And then,
When they do it intentionally, and then I have to pay all this money to do it right, and they do it intentionally and go behind the back to get something done.
oh, I'm not suggesting.
We have to correct it for the property owner that's in tears.
Well, and I think to your point, I mean, had you not corrected the one tonight, that might have incentivized them to move against that contractor. Now, will they do that now? I don't know. They may not. They may decide, hey, I've spent enough money and not move any further, and then that contractor moves on to the next project. So, I mean,
I think at some point that neighbor is gonna come before the board asking
Oh, I'm
for
sure.
a variance there, and,
He does.
well, you've
before he
just set a
sells it.
precedent that it's okay.
well,
No, it isn't.
just so you know.
I didn't.
Because you voted against. But
I take each case individually.
A
on the
variance.
merits of
Yeah,
the
that's
case.
the way you're
Approval of
supposed
one
to.
variance doesn't,
I understand, but
Yeah.
I think that, for my purposes, we should try, do everything we can to be as consistent as possible in how we adjudicate these issues.
I think we need to look at each case individually.
do both. I mean, like, you can still look at each one individually, but then you can apply a system of logic
How many,
System of logic.
I mean, I don't think you need to force the death anymore. Y'all agree? How about how many cases we have before the judge that has not been heard? How many years has it been?
Oh, I'll have that to you before the next meeting.
I don't want to do that.
No, I will probably say there's probably about, I would say anywhere from 4 to 6 that are probably sitting out there.
Some of them 4 or 5 years old, right? How long
Yeah,
has he been
probably.
judged? All right, before you draft the letter, if they approve it, I'll sign it.
Pose the idea of writing a letter. I, for one, would sign that letter as a board member, requesting action on these cases.
Well, and what I'll point out is, most of these appeals are appeals to overturn
Our
your position.
My position is this, you know, at the end of the day, we serve the people of Walden County. If we're wrong, we need to know that. If we're right, we need to know. I don't care if he rules against, I'm not gonna agree if he does, but I think he owes it to this board to have a decision for the board. That's my position. Even though it may be against us, I don't think the judge just sat there 4 or 5 years before making a decision.
I'll get you that list.
Get the letter. Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, aye?
Second.
Second and I.